Last week we started Incoterm 2020, which is very, very important aspect in international trade, because entire international trade is revolving around payments, and payments are revolving around Incoterms. I mean, to avoid unnecessary issues between the buyer and the seller, Incoterms gives a very clear guideline who is responsible for what, and what are the things they have to do, and what is expected from them, whether it's buyer or seller, like that. So when you are dealing with two parties not knowing to each other very well, so we have to have a certain demarcation of your responsibilities, and that is why we are having the Incoterms introduced. And Incoterms, I told you, normally, it was introduced in 1936, and then periodically it was reviewed. New revisions were coming. Last few years, ICC thought, they have decided, okay, we will review the Incoterms every 10 years. So Incoterms 1990 was there, then 2000 was there, 2010 was there. Now we are having 2020. And what are the Incoterms? 11 types of Incoterms. Then why it is so important in the sales contract, and all those things we have discussed. And we have started discussing each and every Incoterm, and I hope we have finished X work. Am I correct? We have finished X work. Or yes or no?
No, sir.
No. I'm doing 4 classes, right?
Sir.
I'm doing
No,
4
sir.
classes. No. So I'll have to start from X work. That's what you're telling me. I
Yes,
thought I have done up to, I have finished X work, right? It's all right. Right. Now the first Incoterm is X work. X work means delivery from the warehouse of the seller. Delivery from the warehouse of the seller. So the seller will produce the goods and keep it in his warehouse. If the buyer wants to buy, they will come to the warehouse and then inspect the goods. If they like, they will select the goods, and then they'll pay. Then the seller's obligations are over. Actually, the seller's main obligations are, they have to manufacture the goods, they have to put them in export packing packaging, and then it is ready for sale. Now, for example, if you are buying cement from Putlam cement factory or Raguna cement factory, right? Then you go to the factory if you want to buy bulk, about 10, 15 lorries or something. Then you go to the factory, then the factory will load the bags. Cement is packed in bags, that you know. Those bags will come to the hardware stores, and then you go to hardware store and buy whatever your requirement, 1 bag or 2 bags or whatever, right? But from the warehouse itself, it is ready, even ready for exports. That packing is okay for even exports, even if you want to export it. ඔගොල්ලෝ දන්නවනේ සිමෙන්ති බෑග් එකක් අස්සේ තව බෑග්ස් කීයක් තියෙනවද කියලා නේද? බෑග්ස් 3-4 තියෙනවා. ඊයේ නම් ක්ලාස් එකේ එක ළමෙක් කිව්වා දැන් තියෙන්නේ බෑග් 2යි කියලා. මම ඒක දන්නෙත් නෑ. Right? But I think this is I mean, maybe more stronger, right? But anyway, it has to be in export packing, right? That's the only obligation the seller is having. So if I take this chart, now you can see the seller will manufacture the goods under seller's risk and under seller's cost. It is very, very important in Incoterms, when you are studying Incoterms, that you have to understand the obligations and responsibilities of each party. The examiner will not ask you what is expert and all those dummy questions. They will not ask you. They will ask you what are the obligations under expert to the seller or the buyer, right? What are the primary duties? What is the seller's primary duty under expert? Questions like that, right? So you have to understand this. What I will try to do is I'll explain to you as a story. Then if you have any gray areas, issues where you can understand, where you want more clarifications, please stop me and ask questions. Right? Please stop me and ask questions. Okay. Now, once the buyer has paid the seller, then seller's obligations are over. That's one of the critical, right? Last week I released Incoterms at a glance. I told you to get a printout and keep it with you. Have you done that? Have you done that? Otherwise, I'll have to. Yeah. Please keep it with you, because otherwise I can't go forward and can't change to another one, and it will take time, right? If you have the chart, that chart you have to get it printed. Take a system, only one page, one side, print it, and that is the chart that will bring you 20 marks. Right? That will bring you 20 marks. Definitely there will be a question. Then you can score 100% from that one-page paper. So it is very, very important when you are studying, always refer that and then do the studying according to that. That's very easy. Right. Now, I told you last week, there are 3 types of carriage in international trade. One is pre-carriage. Pre-carriage is from the warehouse of the seller up to the main carriage. Up to the main carriage. What is main carriage? What is main carriage? Give me some example of the main carriage. Give me some examples of the main carriage. Come on, guys.
Shipping.
Ships. When you are loading in a ship is the main carriage, right? Or else, another example.
Airplanes.
Aircraft. Another one, aircraft. Even trucks or whatever. It depends, right? Now, that is the main carriage. The pre-carriage is from the warehouse of the seller up to the main carriage. You have to transport. Now, for example, there is a garment factory who are doing exports, right? Who are doing exports. The factory is in Mayanganao, Hasalaka area. whatever the production you have to export, you have to bring it to Colombo port. You have to bring it to Colombo port, right? So how we are bringing them to Colombo port? How you are bring them to Colombo port from Mayangane to Colombo? By ship or by aircraft?
By containers?
Containers. You load it to containers and you bring it to Colombo port, right? Or if you have another warehouse in Colombo, from there you can transport it to Colombo warehouse, or you can load it to containers straight away and then bring it to that trip from Mayangana to Colombo. We call it pre-carriage, right? The trip from Mayangane to Colombo, we call it pre-carriage. Right? So pre-carriage is also very, very important. Pre-carriage is also very, very important because during that trip, normally you take the closest route is දහට වංගුව කියලා කියන්නේ නේද? මම යංගිට දැන් හසල කියලා දහට වංගුවෙන් එනවා. ඩ්‍රයිවර්ට වංගුව රිවර්ස් කරගන්න බැරුව මේක පෙරලෙනවා පල්ලමට. Then what's going to happen to the goods? That will get damaged. So even the pre-carriage, you have to have proper insurance. That is why we always take insurance from warehouse to warehouse, from seller's warehouse to buyer's warehouse. Then it will cover everything. So pre-carriage, then the main carriage, and then on carriage. On carriage is after unloading at the buyer's port, then you take the goods, you clear the goods, and then you have to take it to the buyer's warehouse. There also you have to, if it is container, then you can straight away take the container. Otherwise, if the packaging was in boxes or bags or whatever, then you have to hire a lorry or whatever transport and then take it to your warehouse, buyer's warehouse. That is on carriage. So we have to have clear understanding of what is pre-carriage, what do you mean by pre-carriage, main carriage and on carriage, right? I'm not giving any handouts on that, but I might ask a question, right? Okay. Now, the seller's primary duty is to deliver the goods at the disposal of the buyer at the named place. The named place is his warehouse. For example, either ex-work or warehouse or factory or whatever. Then the buyer's primary duty is to take delivery of the goods when they have been placed at his disposal. Once he pay, the goods will be at his disposal. Right? Now they make all arrangements at his own cost and risk to bring the goods to the destination. Everything has to be done by the buyer. Right? Now, here certain critical points are carriage to be arranged by the buyer, because seller's obligations are over. So the pre-carriage, main carriage, everything has to be organized by the buyer. Risk is transferred to the buyer when the goods are placed at his disposal. You saw the first critical point, and then the risk is transferred from seller to buyer. The cost transferred from the seller to the buyer when the goods are at the disposal of the buyer. Even the risk and the cost, everything, including the goods, everything will be transferred to the buyer. Okay. Here I mentioned carriage to be arranged by the buyer. Carriage to be arranged by the buyer. But, okay, if we say, I want to buy goods from China. Am I to go to China every time when I want to buy goods on export? It's impossible. Unnecessary cost to me. So in most companies, because since I have worked in one of the companies as a consultant a few years back, then only I learned, because I told you, our life, every day we are learning something. Right? When I was in the bank for 45 years, every day I learn something. I have worked in almost all the departments and learned the work. Right? Do you know some of the things I'm learning from clerks? Right? Even the peons. අපේ තියෙන ලොකු මේකත් තමයි මතනම් මෙතන ඇති ඔයගලන්ගේ මේ ක්‍රවුඩ් එකේ මැනේජර්ස්ලත් ඇති, ඇසිස්ටන්ට් මැනේජර්ස්ලත් ඇති. ඒගොල්ලෝ කැමති නෑ කියන්න මේ මම මැනේජර්, මම ඇසිස්ටන්ට් මැනේජර්. ඒකින්ද who are you? Who are you to tell me? No. Then you can't run a department, right? This is out of trade. But one day you are going to manage the department. You know my name. You know I have worked in Standard Chartered for 25 years and Carriage Bank here 5 years or 6 years, for 4 or 5 years from the inception till 2016. Others are overseas. නෑන ඔය ඉන්නවනම් පරණ කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවනම් පරණ කෙනෙක් දානුත් ළමයිනම් දන්නේ නැති ඇති. අහලා බලන්නකෝ how is Mr. Caldera කියලා? Was it easy to work with him කියලා? They all loved me as a father. That was even during my younger period. Right? So that is how you have to be with the people. Right? You have to respect people, then you will get the respect. I'm telling you this advice as a very senior banker. Right? This is how you have to work. Don't work like a person who has a soul and head. Right? When I was working for that company, I came to know how they do it on Xwork. Right? They have one of the Chinese ladies representing that particular company, like an agent, the agent of this particular company. She goes to the warehouse and she selects and she arranges the payment in the sense, then she will inform us, we will some other send the money to them, right? Then they arrange everything, even under LC. If it is under LC, there's nothing to worry, right? Nothing to worry. Then you don't have to pay. You open the AC. They will collect the goods. She will arrange the pre-carriage to the port, right? So in case if there's nobody there, then how we are going to arrange the pre-carriage? You can ask the seller to do it for you. They will do it, but at buyer's cost and risk. At buyer's cost and risk, because seller's risk has been over. Whatever he is doing on behalf of the buyer will be at the buyer's cost and on buyer's risk. Understood? Right? And they will charge you. Right? So this is how it is happening in the real life scenario. Now here, another chart for you to understand. Under Xwork, it is open to any mode of transport, right? And the transfer of risk will be from seller to the buyer at the time the goods are at the disposal of the buyer, right? So Xwork, the seller's obligations is Xwork is applicable to any mode of transport, and seller makes the goods available for collection from warehouse at the agreed point or named place of delivery. ඉක්මනට යන්නේ මේක ඔක්කොම මම ඔයගලන්ට explain කරලා කියලා තියෙන්නේ. Once the buyer collects the goods, seller's responsibility is at an end. Right? The seller must, at his own expenses, provide other documents which are necessary for the delivery of the goods. So the documents part, in commercial invoice, then other than the transport document, any document, then certificate of origin, seller කරන්න ඕනේ. නිෂ්පාදකයා then bear all cost until delivery. Right? Then buyer's responsibilities: pay for the goods as per the sale contract, bear all cost and risk involved in shipment transaction, arrange to obtain all licenses, authorizations as may be needed. Sometimes the seller might help you, right? But they will charge you. Contract, carriage, and insurance. Right? Now, for example, buying fruits in Costa Rica. Buying fruits in Costa Rica. Then who is the seller? Seller is in which country?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Yeah, we are going to buy fruits from Costa Rica. So, Expert Finca La Fortuna, that is the company's name. Heredia is the town, right? Costa Rica. Incoterms 2020. This is how we mention in the perform invoice and the commercial invoice, right? The making understood, Expert Finca La Fortuna, Heredia is Expert. It's under Incoterms 2020, right? Buying goods at free trade zone from China, Expert Shanghai Free Trade Zone, Sony Warehouse, China, Incoterms 2020. Understood? Then right. Okay. Before I go to the next one, let me ask, if you are having the chart, don't refer the chart, just answer me, and later you can refer to the chart, right? I'm asking this from the chart. Before that, place in Incoterm is a very, very important thing. Place in Incoterm. When we are mentioning, right, you have to mention the place in Incoterm. One China Incoterms 2020. Place in Incoterm is very important. Costa Rica Incoterms 2020. Okay. So, where is the place? Is it the origin or the destination? In this one, Expert, is it the origin or destination?
Origin.
It is origin. Very good with it. More simple questions, answers. Then there are certain Incoterms, the place we have to mention the destination. I will tell you, just jot down, this is very, very important. Normally, when we were studying in O-level, A-level, even in universities, this is how we study. Lecturers like on the important areas and what highlight කරලා කොටුවක් ගහලා තියාගන්න. මට මතකයි හැපැත් තියෙන ගෑන් ළමයි කරන්න මොනවද? කැම්පස් එකේ යන. අපි කොටුව ගහලා තියෙනකොට ඒ ළමයි ඒක කොටුව ගහලා රතු පාටින් highlighter එකකින් highlight කරලා ඒක රතු පාට පෑනෙන් ඒක ලියලා අර ලස්සනට කරනවා. ඒක හොඳයි. එහෙම වෙන්න ඒක ස්ට්‍රයික් වෙනවා. පාඩම් කරන්න ලේසි. පාඩම් කරන්න ගියාම ආසය බලන්න. right. මම කියන්නේ ඔක්කොට මෙහෙම කරන්න කියලා. නමුත් ඒක තමයි ඉම්පෝටන්ට් ඒවා areas ටික. ලස්සනට හදලා තියාගන්න. lot of people බඳන girls හරි මේ විචි ඒ වැඩේට. right. අපිට ඕනේ එම්ෙන් දමල කාලා කර හැබැයි කෙල්ලන්ට වැඩිය ඔයගොල්ලෝ මාක්ස් ගන්නවා. ඉතින් මොනවද කරන්නේ? ඉච්චරේ අන්තිමට ඕනේ නේද? මේ කොහොමද කරන්න කියන එක වෙනම දෙයක්. මේ පාර බලමු චැලෙන්ජ් එක. ඔන්න අද දුන්නා චැලෙන්ජ් එක. මේ පාර මගේ postgraduate class එකේ මගේ subject එකට වැඩිම ලකුණු ගන්නේ girl කෙනෙක්ද boy කෙනෙක්ද කියලා බලමු. right. girl කෙනෙක්ද boy කෙනෙක්ද කියලා බලමු. I'll give you some promise also. You can contact Kalinga. I can get it from the Kalinga. අපි බලමු හොදෙක් කියන දිනා නම් මම පොඩි මේ ප්‍රසන්ට් එකක් දෙනවා මම ගානේ. not from my myself. මගේ ගාන දෙනවා වැඩිම මාර්ක්ස් ගන්න එක. The highest marks. Right? Maybe 80, maybe 90, maybe 95. 90 ගත්ත ළමයි ඉන්නවා. 90 95 ගත්ත ළමයි ඉන්නවා. කලින් ඉතින් ඒක ගන්න. So the place in Incoterm is very, very important. This is a very, very easy method of memorizing this. Right? All the F terms, all the F terms, all the F can be within inverted commas, capital F. All the F terms, capital all the F terms and X work again within inverted commas. Place in the Incoterm is origin. Place in the Incoterm is origin. All the others, destination. All the others, destination. Right. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ කටපාඩම් කරන්න ඕනේ මොකද්ද? එකයි නේද? X work න අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම origin නේ. දැන් X work අපි ඉගෙන ගත්තා it has to be origin. තව මොකද කටපාඩම් කරන්න ඕනේ? All the F terms, origin. What are the F terms? Quickly. Then කොළහවි කියන්නේ FCA. FI is ne.
FOB.
FA, FOB, FAS, FOB, FAS, FOB. ඔය තුන origin. සහ X work origin. එච්චරයි. අනිත් ඔක්කොම destination. දැන් ලේසි නේද කටපාඩම් කරන්න? ඔක තමයි පාඩම් කරගන්න ඕනේ. Right. If I ask you these questions, X work, what is the place in the Incoterm? Origin or destination?
Origin.
Export clearance, whose responsibility? Export
Buyer.
Export clearance, buyer.
Buyer.
බලන්න එපා පුතේ. මම අහන ඒවට උත්තර දෙන්න පස්සේ බලන්න. Then contract for carriage?
Buyer.
Buyer. Then loading?
Buyer.
Buyer.
Right? Insurance?
Buyer.
Buyer.
එතකොට unloading?
Buyer.
Import clearance?
Buyer.
And paying duty?
Buyer.
Buyer. Then preparing of export documents?
Seller.
Right? දැන් ඔයගන්න පුළුවන් නේද මේ දෙන්නගේ obligations responsibilities ලියන්න? හරි simple. ඔය ටික ඔක්කොම chart එකේ ලස්සනට මම දාලා තියෙනවා එකට එක. ඔය ටික තියෙනවා නම් you can elaborate on that. Right? Okay, fine. The second one is FCA, free carrier. Over in all the garment factories, Arame, Tina Petula in Nick in the Lama in Narkianaman, Kataran. The Mama in the Pate, I'm staying at Atrugiria, Arangal Hari, between Malabi and Arangala. There are one or two garment factories I can see. Because I don't know who are the factory owners, but time to time we can see when you are coming in the night, right? You can see all these container trucks are parked along the road. About 5, 6, 7 trucks are parked along the road. One by one goes inside the factory, get the stuff loaded, and then go to the container yard, Uruguduat. Right? ඊට පස්සේ අනිත් ට්‍රක් එක යනවා අතුලට. ඔය වගේ සීන්ස් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා තියෙනවද? මම සාමාන්‍යව දැක්කම ඒක මගේ පාර්ට්මන්ට් කොහොමද අවර මම කියන්නේ ඉන්ටර්නැෂනල් ට්‍රේඩ් කරන තනි කර අපි එදිනෙදා දකින්න දේ හරියට ඔළුවට ගන්නවා නම් පාඩම් කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. 90 මාක්ස් ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඔළුවට ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඔළුවට ගන්න. ස්ටෝරියක් වගේ දාගන්න. Tell me, have you any experience? I know there are people from all over the country here in this crowd, right? Kurunagala Narammala Patte, Kudaktino. Anybody? Can somebody tell me whether you have seen? I just want to ask you whether you have seen it. That's it. I'm not going to ask you any question. How we are going to load it, I'm not going to ask. Right? දැකලා තියෙනවද ඔයගොල්ලෝ? නෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ වාහනයකනත් යනකොට එක පුදියගෙන යනවා ඇත්තේ. නේද? එහෙම බෑ. ඇස්සරගෙන යන්න ඕන මොකද කොහොමද මේ ට්‍රක්ස් ටික තියෙන්නේ? Why all about 5, 6, 7 container trucks parked? He's saying
Loading.
Huh?
Loading.
Wow, that's for loading. One by one is going. But we have to be inquisitive. Why is it? Why is it? එතකොට තමයි මේක එන්නේ. දැන් free carrier යන්න මේකට. Right? Okay, this free carrier is a term that may be used irrespective of mode of transport. That means this will be applicable to any mode of transport. Right? When the place of delivery is an inland point, right? Incoterms 2020 allows the buyer to instruct the carrier to issue a bill of lading with an onboard notation. This is an optional mechanism. When the place of delivery is an inland point, Incoterms 2020 allows the buyer to instruct the carrier to issue a bill of lading with an onboard notation. It's an optional mechanism. We want to always make a explain story there's a new addition, newly introduced to the Incoterm 2020. 2010 the dates of delivery, inland and loading on board will necessarily be different, which may create difficulties for the seller under a LC. Right? Okay. FCA, now say, seller will prepare the goods and then he will load the goods. Earlier, FC expert, he will not load the goods. Even for the pre-carriage, they will not load the goods. Here, they will load the goods. Then only he will transfer the risk to the buyer. Right? From there onwards, everything is buyer. In FCA is mostly applicable to containerized cargo. So when you load, the cargo will be taken to which place before the shipment? Cargo එක කොහටද අරන් යන්නේ අපි? කොහටද අරන් යන්නේ? ඊයේ මම මේක කළා DABF ක්ලාස් එකට ළමයි හොඳට උත්තර දුන්නා. ඒ ක්ලාක්ස්ලා ලංකාවේ කොහටද අරන් යන්නේ?
Port,
පෝට් එකට
customs,
නෑ
customs,
නෑ නෑ. කස්ටම් කියයි දැන් මේ ලෝක කස්ටම් එකේ නෝ කම්පැනි එකට. ඒල කස්ටම් සීල් කරලා තියෙනවා.
Buyer's warehouse.
බයස් ව්‍යාහස් කොහෙද කොළඹ වල තියෙන්නේ? බය ඉන්නේ ඇමරිකාවේ නම්. Mind over this a container. I මේ ළමයි
Shipping
ඔක්කොම
line.
මේ ළමයි ඔක්කොම යන්නේ නිකන් ඇස් වහගෙන යන්නේ බස් එකේ ගියත් ඇස් වහගෙන යන්නේ. මේ මට මම ඔය ප්ලේස් එක පාස් වෙනකොට මම දකිනවා.
Container yard.
කන්ටේනර් එකක් කොහෙද තියෙන්නේ?
උරුගොඩවල.
උරුගොඩවත්ත. අයියෝ ඔකට ගියේ වල. උරුගොඩවත්ත කන්ටේනර් යාඩ් එකේ. එතනින් තමයි නැව ආවට පස්සේ when the buyer arrange the ship, then from there on only it will be transported to the ship, straight away to the ship. No custom barriers, no export duties, export clearance. Everything has been done at the customer's seller's warehouse. Right? Now, this is how it is happening in these factories. I told you for containerized cargo, this is the best one, FCA. They have to provide, the seller has to provide the goods, deliver them to the carrier or any person nominated by the buyer at a named place. Right? Till then, the seller bears all risk. Up to the point they deliver the goods to the container yard at Uruguay, it is at seller's risk. Right? Put the goods in good packing. Done. Obtain security clearance and other formalities for export of goods at their cost and risk. Security clearance and other formalities for export of goods at their cost and risk. The seller has no obligations to buy insurance to cover loss or damages to the goods. But if they want, they can take an insurance for the transportation up to the container yard. If I am doing business, if I am the owner of the garment factory in Mayangana, I will do it. I will insure my transportation from the warehouse to the container yard. Right? නැත්නම් වෙන්නේ අන්තිමට මට මුකුත් නැහැ. Right? Delivery is completed when the goods are placed at the disposal of the carrier. Carrier එක පටන් ගන්නේ container yard එකේ. එතනින් තිබ්බට පස්සේ ඉවරයි. Right? However, before the loading of the goods on board the vessel. මේකට ඔඩ් දාන්න ඉස්සරනේ යන්නේ container yard එකේ තිබ්බට පස්සේ අපේ that's where we place the goods at the disposal of the carrier. Right? Now, in these companies, what is happening is, in most companies, they will, I'll explain to you. Okay, if you have received, if the exporter has received a confirmed order to export ladies' garments like skirts, blouses, ladies' trousers, ladies' pants, okay, ladies' garments to UK. අපි තුම ලොකු hi-fi shop එකක් කියලා Marks and Spencer. Do you know that Marks and Spencer shop එකේ ගොඩක් garments වල ගිහිල්ලා ඊට පස්සේ බලනකොට ගහලා තියෙනවා made in Sri Lanka. You feel proud. You can't buy goods from Marks and Spencer unless there is unless during the sale period. Right? Time to time they put sale period එක විතරයි අපිට ගිහිල්ලා ගන්න පුළුවන්. නැත්නම් ගන්න බෑ. very expensive. The same shirt you and me are wearing, same shirt, right? Marks and Spencer shirts, ලංකාවේ ගහන්නේ. ලංකාවේ හදන්නේ Marks and Spencer shirts කියන one of the very expensive shirts in the world, right? Normally a shirt will cost you about $50 to $60. එහෙම නැත්නම් $100. $100 කියන්නේ ඉතින් රුපියල් 30000ක් විතර වගේ. ඒ ගානට අපිට ෂර්ට් එකක් ගන්න බෑ. Time to time they put sale, right? අරගෙන දැක්කම අපිටම ආඩම්බරයි. How you are transporting shirts නම් අපි යවන්නේ boxes වල. Ladies blouses, trousers, ඒව කොහොමද අරින්නේ අපි? boxes වල දෙන්නේ නෑ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ කඩේට ගිහිල්ලා ගන්න විදියටමයි හැංගර්ස් වල තියෙන්නේ. හැංගර්ස් වල දාලා එල්ලලා තියෙනවා. දැන් ලොකු ෂොප් එකකට ගියම දන්නවනේ කොහොම හැංගර්ස් වල දාලා තියෙන්නේ. අපිට තෝරලා ගන්න. ඒ වගේ මේකත් හැංගර්ස් වල තියෙනවා. ඒ හැංගර්ස් පිටින්ම තමයි යවන්නේ. ඒ හැංගර්ස් ආපහු ලංකාවට එනවා. right? ඒක තමයි agreement එක. So ඒ හැංගර්ස් ප්‍රොවයිඩ් කරන්නේ container company එකමයි. container transport company එකම එක Carriage මේ carrier එකෙන් තමයි කරන්නේ. carrier තමයි ඒක ප්‍රොවයිඩ් කරන්නේ. ඊට පස්සේ අර වේ ඔක්කොම පැක් කළා නෙමෙයි sorry hang කළා තියලා then the custom officer will come to the factory and then he will stay there and he will supervise the loading. ඒතර හැම එකම යා ලියනවා. අරගොල්ලෝ දෙනවා මේ මොනවද ඒකට කියන්නේ list of items මේ container එකේ මෙච්චර මේ container එකේ මෙච්චර ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නවනේ කලින් ඒ ඔක්කොම දෙනවා. අර ඔක්කොම ටික් කරනවා. ටික් කළා then they will work out the taxes. Right? Either the taxes normally it has to be done by the seller. Export clearance. Taxes ගෙවලා පටවන්න. Then once the container is loaded, they close the container, they put padlocks. Customs also put a lock. Customs වල දාන අමුතුම lock එකක් තියෙන්නේ මේ plastic lock එකක් තියෙන්නේ. right? ඒක දාලා ඒක මම පස්සේ ඒක කඩන්න බෑ. ඒක කඩනොත් at the time when you are unloading, if the other country, if they found it was manipulated, it will be a problem, big problem. So the custom is done. So that's why I said no more custom barriers thereafter. Right? Then the container will be taken to the container yard and it will be unload there. It was a lorry container until the buyer arrange the ship. When the buyer arrange the ship, the shipping company will take that container and straight away they'll load it to the ship and taken to the destination. And this is how it is happening. Right? The Mithindi Mankuwa, sometimes, all these times, under FCA, BL was not a must. But this time, what they have mentioned was the carrier, but again, it is an obligation of the buyer, right? The buyer can instruct the carrier to issue a bill of lading and on-board notation. Once they put the goods on board, then the carrier will issue a bill of lading. That bill of lading also can be a part of the documentation, right? But it is not a must, it's an optional mechanism. Because the thing is, the dates of delivery inlet. Now the company has delivered the goods to the buyer, company has delivered the goods to the buyer on August 1st. ඒ කියන්නේ කම්පැනි එකේ warehouse එකකින් container yard එකට දුන්නේ August 1st. දැන් අරගොල්ලන්ගේ buyer has to arrange the shipment. ඒ shipment එක perishable item එක නෙමෙයිනේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ ලාභ ship එකක් ගන්නට arrange කරගෙන suitable ship. Then they will load the thing on 20th August. So there will be sometimes under LC, this will create difficulties to the seller. Right? It can be differences immediately and in a right. Okay. In buyer's obligations, the risk, all risk of loss, damage from the time or end of the period agreed for delivery. That's buyer. Carriage, contract the carriage from the place of delivery unless agreed with the seller. Unless agreed with the seller. Right? Sometimes the seller might help the buyer, but at the buyer's cost and buyer's risk. Insurance, no obligations. However, the general practice is buyer to insure the goods. They have to know if they want the security. Delivery, transport document, except the proof of delivery. If agreed, the buyer must instruct the carrier to issue a transport document. I explained. Export-import clearance, assist with export clearance, import clearance and formalities, license, security, official documentation, everything by the buyer. Right? Assist with export clearance. Buyer can assist with export clearance, but export clearance is obligation of the seller. But the import clearance, of course, 100% buyer. Right? Right. The FCA significant changes in this new Incoterms 2020. Buyers can now instruct the carrier to issue the onboard BL to the seller, so that the seller may satisfy the terms of a LC. Under F terms, the place in the Incoterm is origin, but buyer hires the main carrier and freight forwarder. Right? The seller does not control the shipment under F terms. Therefore, FNF therefore freight forwarder මේක පාට බැලුවා මේ මම ලියපු එක මට මතක නැහැ මොකද්ද කියලා මේ therefore the freight forwarder and the carrier has no obligation to the seller because they have been arranged by the buyer. Right? Okay. Now, before I move on to the other one, let's ask a few questions again. Just see, check your memory. Under FCA, what is the place in the Incoterm?
Origin.
Place in the Incoterm is origin, F term. Right? Making Gahala Matina. Export clearance by seller. Export clearance by seller, but buyer might assist. Right? Then contract for carriage.
Buyer.
Contract for carriage, buyer. Loading.
Seller.
Loading, seller. The insurance.
Buyer.
මෙතන loading කියන්නේ ship එකට load කළා නෙමෙයි container එකට load කළා කියන්නේ ඒක ඉහට ඉවරයි. Then unloading.
Buyer.
import clearance, buyer. Right? So now you know what are the obligations of importer and the exporter. Right. Then the third one is FAS, free alongside ship. Free alongside ship කියන්නේ ship එක ගාවින්ට ගේනවා. ship එක ගාවට ගේනවා බඩු ටික. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ ටෙලිග්‍රාමයක් වගේ ඔලිය හදා ගන්නවා නම් ජෙටියට පාක් කරලා තියෙනවා නැව ගාවට නැව පාක් කරලා තියෙනවා නැව ගාවට බඩු ටික ගේනවා. එතනින් මෙයාගේ රෙස්පොන්සිබිලිටි එක ඉවරයි. දැන් හරිනේ? Right? This term is specifically used for carriage of goods by sea. Free alongside ship නේ. එහෙනම් free alongside ship. එතකොට එහෙනම් අපි එන්න ඕනේ name port of shipment. Name port of shipment. Why name port of shipment ඉන්නේ? FAS, what is the place of the Incoterm? Origin or
Origin.
destination?
Origin.
Origin. And the place is port. Ne? Port of shipment. Port of shipment is the place. That's why we say named port of shipment. Normally we say FAS Colombo. FAS Colombo. That means එච්චරයි කියන්නේ FAS Colombo විතරයි අපි තියෙන්නේ Incoterm එකේ. දැන් අපි දැනගන්න ඕන කොහෙන්ද මේ බඩු ටික පටවන්නේ කියලා. කොහෙන්ද පටවන්නේ?
From Colombo.
From Colombo. If it is FAS Hambantota, then the loading will be from Hambantota. එච්චරයි. දැන් බලන්න ඒ වෙනකන් ඔක්කොම ටික අපි ටික උඩින් හදා ගන්න ඕනේ. Exporter's contractual obligation is to deliver the packed goods alongside the vessel named by the importer at the name port. The vessel will be organized by the importer. So he has organized the vessel. Now it has anchored at the jetty. Right? Now we are taking the goods up to the vessel. Up to the vessel. Right? The importer is responsible for insurance, loading and unloading, transporting the goods from alongside the vessel. Everything imported. When the goods are in containers, very important. If the goods are loaded in the containers, now you are bankers, you may be managers, system managers in respective banks. When your customers come, you have to inform them. You have to inform them to do the correct thing. You don't have to be a master in trade finance, but with this knowledge, you should be able to advise them. Don't give the wrong advices, right? But the customers like if the manager gives some advices, people are committed. When I go to any bank in Colombo, I'm having a few accounts with few banks. They know me. Everybody they know me. My background, who I am, and everything. They know me. Right? But even then, sometimes when I walked into a branch, the manager will, if they see me, they will come to me and ask me, come Mr. Caldera, come to my room. Do you like to have a cup of tea? They have a look. මට ඇත්තටම මම සන්තෝෂයෙන් හැමතැනම ගෝලෙ ඉන්නවා. Especially postgraduate ගෝලෙ. ඒගොල්ලෝ managers නෙමෙයි. Especially postgraduate ගෝලෙ. සමහර අය manager කියලා කිව්වොත් එහෙම කට්ටියත් මට දැකලා තියෙනවා. manager ගිහිල්ලා මේ assistant manager සමහරවිට කතා කරලා කියනවා මේ මිස්ටර් කල්දේරා මට ඉගෙනුවා මගේ සර් කෙනෙක්. He has some issues. Can you please get the things sorted out කියලා කිව්වහම අර ළමයි සමහර වෙලාවට මටම කියලා තියෙනවා අර මැනේජර් කෙනා yes even I have done postgraduate under him. හැබැයි අර කැවිලා කියනකම් කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ. කමන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් අපි ඉතින් වයසනේ නේද? ඉතින් එහෙම නෙමෙයි. ඔයගොල්ලෝ නම් අපිට දැක්කොත් අඩු ගානේ මූණ හරියට දැකලා නැති වුණත් අපි ෆිසිකලි නම දැනගත්තාම පොඩ්ඩක් මතක ආවම කතා කරන්න. ඒක තමයි අපිට දෙන ලොකුම සන්තෝෂය. ඉතින් මම කියන්නේ මම තාම මැනේජර් කෙනෙක් මට එලා කියනවා සර් මෙහෙමයි සර් මේක දැන් අලුත් රෙගියුලේෂන් එකක් තියෙනවානේ. So we have to listen, we have to learn, right? This is very important. Then I have more faith on that guy. The same with the customer, other customers also. If the manager tells you something, then you will develop the faith. A faith again, customers will be loyal to the bank, right? So when it comes to containerized cargo, you should ask these people, don't use FAs. The more appropriate one is FCA. If it is containerized cargo, it is FCA. Because when the goods are in containers, the seller has to hand the goods over to the carrier at a terminal and not alongside the vessel. Now, containerized cargo, you can't take the goods to the up to the vessel. No? Alongside the vessel, you can't take. You have to deliver it to the terminal, container terminal. From there on only, it should go to the ship, right? Abit aro bypass kala yanne bෑ. So therefore, do you think it is more appropriate? What is more appropriate to have the best Incoterm? Is it FCA or FAS?
FCA.
FCA is more appropriate because FCA we deliver it to the container terminal, right? If you use FAS, you can't deliver it to the container terminal. Then you have to deliver it to the port alongside the ship. ඒක කරන්න බෑ. Right? The container yard එකෙන් තමයි අරගොල්ලෝ එකින් එක ගන්න. Then the FCA rule is more appropriate. Why I am telling you this is very important for your information. We had the tsunami in 2004, ne? We had the tsunami in 2004. Later that, I think 2006 or 7, Japan had another tsunami. And Nagoya is one of the main ports there. Nagoya port එකේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවනේ tsunami කොච්චර powerful ද කියලා අර හැරෑලියේ ship train එක ඇම්බරිලා යන්න වැදුණානේ. train එකක් කොච්චර බරද මිනිස්සුත් එක්ක. ඒවා තල්ලු කරගෙන ගිහලා ගස්සලා හැප්පිලා මිනිස්සු මැරලා විනාශලා යන්න වැදුණානේ. You can see how strong the tsunami was, right? The same with Japan. Japan නිතරම tsunamis එන රටක්. ඒ tsunami එකේදී most of the containers, hundreds of containers which were lying in the jetty was washed over to the sea. And then the people asked the what do you call this? Damages from the insurance companies. Do you believe for some insurance companies, most of the insurance companies, they refuse to pay the insurance, saying that they have used the wrong Incoterm. Wrong Incoterm. Right? Then මේකේ අපි FAS දාලා container yard එකට deliver කරනද අතෙන්ට deliver කරලා තිබ්බනම් එහෙම තියෙන නැති වුණොත් එහෙම එතන ඒගොල්ලෝ check කරනවා. දන්නවනේ ගෙවන්න ඉස්සලා ඒකම check කරනවා. Who has delivered? Seller. Seller can't do that. then they have used a strong this thing. Right? ඔයගේ ගොඩාක් issues ආවා. අපි ඉතින් කතා කරලා මේක ගන්න ඇති. නමුත් ඔය issues එනවා. So that is why we have to be very careful about the Incoterm. Right? Now here, now slowly the green, brown color one is going from left to right. Earlier it was seller. Now the second one was loaded. Well, now we along the ship. That's the place where the risk is going to get transferred from seller to buyer. And from there onwards, this buyer's responsibility. Right? A phase, port of shipment, delivery alongside the ship on quay, jetty again, nominated by the buyer at port or shipment. Right? It was a thing, train again, patola, navate, dano. Examples: buying a boat with pickup on 10th March before noon, Incoterms 2020. Buying a boat with pickup on 10th March before noon, Incoterms 2020. This is the requirement. අපි දාලා තියෙන්නේ FAS Pier 10 Port of Miami, Florida, Incoterms 2020. Pier 10. Pier 10 කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? What is pier? Pier කියන එක දන්නවනේ. Pier කියන්නේ jetty එක. දැන් අපේ තියෙන්නේ මොනවාද මේ පෞගේ කාලේ කේස් ගොඩක් ආවේ. නැගෙනහිර jetty, බටහිර jetty, pier එකක් කියන එකනේ. Pier 10 Port of Miami. Port of Miami වල Pier 10 එකෙන් තමයි ඒක load කරන්නේ. Right? Buying a machine to corrugated boxes in different sets and parts, non-containerized, then you say FAS Bremen Pier 2 Incoterms 2020. Right? This is my Incoterms වලට එන්නේ. ඔයගන්ට අවශ්‍ය ප්‍රමාණයට වැඩි explain කරලා කියනවා. Right. Now you tell me FAS, what is the place in the Incoterm? Origin or destination? FAS.
Origin.
Then who will do the export clearance? Seller. දැන් බලන්න ඔයගන්ට මතක තියාගන්න පුතේ මෙච්චරයි. What is the seller's ultimate obligation? We have to deliver alongside the ship. Ship එක ගාවට එන්න ඕන. Ship එක ගාවින් තියන්න you have to go through the custom barriers. ඔච්චර උඩට ගන්නද? You have to go through the custom barriers. Right? Then obviously the seller has to do the custom clearance. Right? Who has to do the pre-carriage?
Seller.
Seller. Contract for main carriage? Buyer. Right? Then loading?
Buyer.
Loading buyer. Very good. Loading buyer. Loading seller එහෙම ගොනවා ඔලු බලනවා. සෙල්ලගේ obligations ඉවරයි. නැව ගාවි තිබ්බට පස්සේ. පැටවුවත් එක නැතත් එක. Right? Then insurance.
Buyer.
Right? Unloading.
Buyer.
Import clearance.
Buyer.
Who has to prepare the export documentation?
Seller.
Who has to do the on carriage?
Buyer.
Buyer. Very good. Very good. I'm organizing like a pretty personal one among then when I'm doing these lectures, when I want to put everything into your mind, පොවන්න ඕන කාලයක් තියෙනවා. පොවන්න මේක පෙව්වට පස්සේ හරිනේ. Then I might use both languages. Is it okay with you?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Huh? Because not that I
Yes,
can't
sir.
tell you everything in English, but when we are discussing like this in a more friendly manner, that will go into your head, right? The mama, oh, mama kiwot him, the seller has to keep the goods alongside the ship. After that, he is not responsible. That's right. But ඒකම කියතයි seller make a guarantee, but the seller has to bring the goods up to the point of alongside the ship. ඊට පස්සේ පැටවුවත් එකයි නැතත් එකයි ඕන කිහිමලක් සෙලර්ගේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. ඕනනම් ඒක තමයි වදින්නේ නේ. මම හිතනවා ඕගන්ට වදින්නේ ඒක. ඒක තමයි මම අර මික්ස් කරලා ලැන්ග්වේජ් එක යූස් කරන්නේ. right? ඒක හොඳට ඔළුවට දාගන්න ඕනේ. ඒක කමන්නේ නැහැ නේද?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
In the expert can this terms,
Yeah.
Until the documentation part has to be done by the buyer, no?
No. All the 11 Incoterms, documentation part has to be done by the basic documentation part has to be done by the seller. Right?
Then
And actually,
BL and everything?
yeah, BL and everything by the
Buyer,
BL and, BL and everything by the buyer.
And then the seller has to collect this BL and everything and hand over to the bank.
Very correct. Very correct. Now you got the picture. Then the seller will collect all those documents and then submit all the documents to his bank. Right? Very good question and good thinking. Right? Can I have your name, please?
I'm Viraj,
Viraj. Viraj, which bank you are working?
commercial bank.
Commercial bank. Very good, Viraj. Very good. And okay, මේක ඇවිල්ලා මම කියන්නේ මට ඕනේ ඔයගලන්ගේ ඔළුවේ ස්ටෝරි එකක් හදාගන්න විතරයි. ඉතින් එහාට මේක නැතුව මේ buyer will never come to the seller's country and get involved in all these things, right? In most cases, seller will do it, but at the cost and risk of the buyer. That's very important. So FOB is another common one. Common one තුනක් විතරක් මම මේකේ graph අරන් තියෙනවා. Right? Seller's primary duty to deliver the goods on board. Deliver the goods on board. What do you mean by on board? You have to place the goods on board of the vessel. On board the vessel. Right? FOB for what is the mode of shipment? Any mode or sea and inland waterway? FOB.
Any mode?
Any mode?
No.
කියන්න බලන්න.
You go on.
Sea and inland.
Inland water.
sea and inland waterway. කොහෙද දැන් we on board කියන්නේ නැවට පටවනන්නේ. නැවක් නැතුව ට්‍රක් එකකට පටවන එකට අපිට කියන්න බෑනේ නැවට පටවුවා කියලා. නේද? On board. Then provide export clearance. Export license, pay export taxes and fees if required. Then provide a clean on-board receipt. On-board BL එකක් දෙනවා. On-board BL. Pay loading cost according to the customer. So, කොහොම සෙලර්ගේ වැඩ. Pay loading cost according to the custom of the port to the extent that they are not included in the freight. Right? If the loading cost is not included in the freight, then they have to pay separately. Buyer's primary duty is to nominate the carrier. They will nominate the carrier. Once they nominate the carrier, seller will load it to the carrier. Contract for the carriage and pay freight and pay unloading cost. Contract for the carriage and pay freight. This paying freight for the carriage, either you can include loading and unloading also. That's a normal common thing. Sometimes they will arrange only the vessel. In this case, the buyer will FOB. The buyer will arrange only the vessel. Only the vessel. One moment. Okay, class. Right. Buyer will only name the vessel. Because the seller's primary duty is to keep the goods on board. On board, they have to load it, right? They have to load it and then keep it on board. Then why the hell the buyer wants to pay for loading charges? That is seller's duty. Then that can either FOB ගුවහම මේ දෙන්න cost එක බෙදාගන්න හැටි. එතනින් එහාට වෙන මොකවත් කියන්නේ නැහැ. Contract එකේ තියෙන FOB. That's it. Right? FOB Colombo. Finish. All that make it බෙදාගන්න කියන එක. Now here the goods, the sellers has to prepare the goods and deliver the goods up to the main carriage, right? And load it on board. Then pre-carriage also done by seller at seller's risk, at seller's cost, right? This in 2000, in 2000. බල්ලෙකුත් මගේ කතාව අහගෙන ඉන්නවා. Okay, mute කරනවා හොඳයි පුතේ. Right? Okay. මේකේ අපි මේ Incoterm 2000 එකේදී we were having මේක තිබුණ කොහොමද දන්නවද FOB එක? When the goods goes over the ship's rail. When the goods goes over the ship's rail. Have you seen a ship's rail? RAIL. Ship's rail. Ship ki rail එක දැකලා තියෙනවද? Viraj? Have you seen?
No, sir.
No. Diane, have you seen? Ship's rail. No answer. Amali? Or girls again, කතා කට්ටිය ඉන්නවනේ. Have you seen? Yeah. Can you please mute? Can you please mute? All right. ඔක්කොම බොරුකාරයෝ ඉන්නේ. මේ ෂිප් එක රේල් එක දැකලා නැහැ කියන මිනිස්සු ඔක්කොම බොරුකාරයෝ. මේ ගර්ල්ස් හවුස් කවුරුත් දැකලා නැද්ද? මම දන්නවා මෙතන ඉන්න කොල්ලෝ ටික ඔක්කොම දැකලා තියෙනවා. ගර්ල්ස් හවුස් ඔක්කොම දැකලා තියෙනවා.
chip එකේ වැට.
ෂිප් එකේ වැට. ෂිප් එකේ රේල් එක කියන්නේ වැට නෙමෙයි. ෂිප් එකේ රේල් එක කියන්නේ කෙරවල. I think I'm 100% sure you all have seen the film Titanic. Baladinone Titanic film. In the Titanic film, can you remember the very, very famous song by Whitney Houston ගෙන් අර මොකක්ද මේ අර දෙන්න Rose and with that boy's name? Titanic. Huh?
Jack.
Huh?
Jackson.
Excuse me.
මොකද්ද?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, මොකද්ද?
So if we translate the term FOB to the Sinhala, what should be?
It's the ප්‍රශ්නය. නැව මත පැටවූ.
Thank you, sir.
නැව තට්ටුව මත පැටවූ. නැව තට්ටුව මත පැටවූ. හරි? නැව තට්ටුව මත පැටවූ. අර මොකද පුතේ බොයිගේ නම මේ ඒ ෆිල්ම් එකේ
Jackson.
Jack and Rose. And really that famous song අර නැවේ අර කෙරෝරේට වෙලා අත් දෙක මේ කරගෙන හිටියේ. That's the ship's rail. Right? Though in Incoterm 2000, well, when the goods goes over the ship's rail. So when the goods goes over the ship's rail, it is gantry එකකින් මේ කරන්නේ මේ එක උඩ ගිහිල්ලා ට්‍රේන් එකේ ships rail එකේ උඩට ගිහිල්ලා දැන් ඔන්න තාම නැවේ තට්ටුව තියන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා මේ ට්‍රේන් එකකින් ගැලවෙනවා. ගැලවුණොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? ඒක නැවෙයි තට්ටුවට කඩාගෙන වැටෙනවා. අපි තුමු we think that glasses or mirrors they get damaged. Finish. Right? Then whose responsibility? Then the both parties started fighting. The seller was saying, no, the goods went over the ship's rail. Then only it was crashed. The buyer said, no. Right? It was almost over the ship's rail, but not cross the ship's rail. That is why it's crashed. We are independent. Confused. Then only in 2010, I told you every 10 years we revise. So all these issues we take and then we consider those issues and we change the FOB Incoterms to say when the goods are placed on the deck. So until you place the goods on the deck, it is the responsibility of the seller. නැවේ තට්ටුව මත පැටවන තෙක් එයාගේ responsibility. එතනින් තමයි risk එක transfer වෙන්නේ. It is clear? Right. Okay. දැන් ඒකින්ද හැම sea shipment එකකදීම once the goods are placed on the deck, then only the risk will be transferred. Right? Okay. Fine. Then the critical points, the carriage arranged by the buyer, the risk transferred to the buyer when the goods delivered on board the vessel, nominated by the vessel, on board the vessel. Cost transferred from seller to the buyer when the goods delivered on board the vessel, nominated by the buyer. Right? Okay. දැන් බලන්න මේ brown එක පොඩ shift වෙනවා to the left. Right? FOB term is used for carriage of goods by sea. Exporter's contractual obligation is to deliver the goods packed in usual manner. This is very important. Underline කරලා තියාගන්න ඕනේ. Goods packed in usual manner. That means export quality packing තියෙනවා. On board the vessel named by the importer at the named port. The seller has no obligation to the buyer to make a contract of carriage or of insurance. So both has to be done by the buyer. FOB may not be appropriate where goods are handed over to the carrier before they are on board the vessel. When we are loading the goods in containers that we have already, because the container is provided by the carrier, and when we load it to the container, checked and sealed, we have handed over the goods to the carrier. right? So even in FOB, if the goods are in containers, better to use FCA. Better to use FCA. A lot of bankers, they made this mistake. The customers make a customers are done. Customers are income 20 details done. Pay trade experts are ignore. Ultimately, if something happens, who is going to get, who has to bear the loss? The customer. The customer to bear the loss. So that I will sue the bank. Why the hell you didn't tell me? Right? Okay. Now under FOB, tell me what is the place in the Incoterm?
Origin.
Origin. Then the export clearance. Export clearance. Exporter. On carriage. Sorry. Pre-carriage.
Export.
Pre-carriage, export. Right? Then contract of carriage, main carriage.
Buyer.
Buy.
Export.
Insurance. FOB. Insurance. Buyer.
Buyer.
Insurance. Then unloading.
Importer.
Importer. Then
Buyer.
on carriage. Buyer. Paying import duty.
Buyer.
Buyer. Right? Okay. Then
Buyer.
the next one is cost. The next one is cost and freight. Now, can you mute it? Okay. When I ask the question, unmute, answer, and then again mute it. Right? Mute, unmute. Hello? Somebody wants to tell me something? Okay, fine. The next one is cost and freight, CFR. Right? And the CFR, the only difference, now I don't have to explain everything, right? Seller has to deliver the goods on board. And after that, the only difference from FOB is FOB who will contract for carriage, main carriage, FOB, buyer or seller?
Buyer.
Buyer.
Buyer. In cost and freight, it will be done by the seller. The main carriage will be contracted by the seller. Right? Again, seller cost together, right? Then buyer primary duty to provide the import clearance and unloading, and who has to take the insurance? Who has to take the insurance? Seller or buyer?
Seller.
Seller.
Buyer.
Some say seller, some say buyer. Cost and freight. The seller is paying only the freight, not the insurance. Insurance has to be arranged by the buyer. Mute please. Because you are disturbing everybody. Right? Only when I ask a question, unmute it and answer. Answer no parinde. But immediately after that, mute it. Right? Then critical points. carriage arranged by the seller, risk transferred to the buyer when the goods delivered on board the vessel, cost transferred at the port of destination. Right? CFR. Now the brown one is shifting more up to the on arrival at the seller's at the buyer's destination, at the buyer's port. It is seller's cost. Right? Then buyer cost again in the aduvilla. CFR named port of destination. Right? Named port of destination. Whether the method and destination. This term is specially used for carriage of goods by sea. Exporter fulfills his contractual obligations when he delivers the goods packed in usual manner, vessel at the port of shipment. Right? The seller must contract for and pay the cost and freight necessary to bring the goods to the named port of destination. Insurance is an obligation of the importer. Can they do the transaction without insurance? They can. If they want, they can. But they have to forget about the money. They have to forget about the money. Right? CFR also may not be appropriate for containerized cargo. CPT rule should be used. CPT rule should be used. Right? CFR දාන්න හොඳ නැහැ containerized cargo වලට. Then we have to use CPT, carriage page 2 rule should be used. Right. CFR. Shall we ask the questions now? What is the place in the Incoterm CFR? Destination or origin?
Destination.
Destination. Only the F terms and X work are origin. Then own එකක් ආපු ගමන් ගෙලින්ම destination. Then who has to produce the goods?
Seller.
ඒකට හිරුනේ මම ඉස්ලාම් ඔය ප්‍රශ්නේ ඇහුවේ නෑනේ නේද? දැන් කල්පනා කරනවා මේ මොකද්ද මේ ආන්නේ කියලා. Right? Then on carriage, pre-carriage.
Seller.
Then export clearance and paying export taxes.
Seller.
Contract of carriage, main carriage.
Buyer.
Seller.
Why do
Seller.
I use
Seller.
buyer? It has to be seller නේ අපි කියවනේ දෙකෙන් දෙකට කිව්වා. මේ ස්ලයිඩ් එකේ මම දාලා තියෙන ස්ලයිඩ් එකේ උඩින් টොප් එකටම තියෙනවා sellers primary duty contract for the carriage ACIF අරගෙත් තියෙනවා. හරි මේකෙත් තියෙනවා. Carriage arranged by the seller. Contract for the carriage. Pay freight. Right? Carriage arranged by the seller. CFR. Okay. Then loading.
Seller.
Seller. Unloading.
Buyer.
Pay import duty.
Buyer.
Buyer. Insurance.
Buyer.
Buyer. On carriage.
Buyer.
Seller. දැන් ඉතල යන්න ඕනේ බයගේ රටට ගිහිල්ලා අර බාපු මේ ටික කරගහගෙන යන්න ඕන දැන් අරයාගේ වෙයාවුස් එකට. නිකන් කටටවට කියන්න එපා. කල්පනා කරන්න. right? බඩ ගාලා කියන්න එපා. ඉවත් ඉතින් වරදිනවා. අපර කලබලේ කිව්වොත් වරදිනවා. මේක අපරාධ විභාගයටත් වරදිනවා. right? උදර කල්පනා මං කියන්නේ ස්ටෝරි එකක් වගේ ඔලුවට දාගන්න. ටෙලිග්‍රාමයක් බලනෝගේ හදාගන්න. on carriage කොහොමත් වෙන්න බෑනේ සෙලට. මොන එකකට ආවත් නේද? ඒක බයටම තමයි කරගන්න පුළුවන්. on carriage වෙන එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒක අපි ඉගෙන ගමු. එකම එකක් තියෙනවා on carriage. ඒ අරෙන්න අනිත් ඔක්කොම මේවා. Right. Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
In all these terms, does the bank has obligation?
Does the bank has obligation? No obligation.
No obligations.
No obligation. We have to check whether the documentation are there. That's it. This is between buyer and seller. Right?
Earlier question you said that we have to advise the buyer.
And we have to advise the buyer or seller. What I meant was, sometimes they will enter into wrong contracts. If it is containerized cargo, they might use for FAS එකට ඒගොල්ලෝ use කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ FAS use කරන්න පුළුවන්. If it is containerized cargo, right? When you see that, it is good. That is, you have no obligations. You have no obligation. But I told you, the buyers will like you if you can advise them why you are using FAS. It is wrong, no? Better to use FCA because it's containerized cargo, no? So there's no way you can keep alongside the ship, free alongside the ship, right? Better use, if it is containerized cargo, better use FCA. And ඒ වගේ advice එකක් තමයි දෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ අරෙන්න වෙන කරන්න බෑ. ඒක නොදුන්නා කියලා කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. බයර් මේ කස්ටමර්ට ඕන කෙහෙමලක් කරගන්න එක නිකන් ඉඳලා පුළුවන්. No issue. But what I told you is value addition. That's it. That value addition will glue that customer to you. But if you give wrong advice and if the customer incurred a loss, ඊට පස්සේ ඉතින් පුතේ පොඩ්ඩක් පරිස්සම්ෙන් රට වැඩ යනකොට එල පිහින් අල්ලවත් ඇර ඇසිඩ් පාරක් ගහලවත් මූ තමයි මාව කෑවේ කියලා. ඒකින්ද හරි දේ කියන්නේ හරි දේ දන්නේ නැත්නම් නොකිය ඉන්න. right? Okay. මම එහෙම කියලා තියෙනවා මිනිස්සුන්ට මම ඊගාව පාඩමේදී මම උගන්ට අදම ඔක කතා කරාවි the risk under trade finance, right? එතකොට මම කියන්නම් stories how we have advised and the customer has not listened to me and the loss in income. Right? Yeah. Then CIF, cost insurance and freight. Cost insurance freight, I'm not going to elaborate on that. I have explained to you CFR. Now, only addition is, in CFR, insurance was an obligation of the buyer. Here, even the insurance, cost insurance and freight, everything will be done by the seller. That's it. Otherwise, everything very much similar to CFR. Right? Make mga po ewan doon na yan eh. Then CIF, this term is specially used for carriage of goods by sea. Exporter fulfills his contractual obligations when delivers the goods packed in usual manner on board the vessel at the port of shipment. He is responsible for transportation and insurance of the goods. Right? Exporter. Seller. The seller should contract for insurance. Seller should contract for insurance cover against the buyer's risk of loss or damage to the goods during the carriage. Right? Under CIF, seller is required to obtain insurance only on minimum cover. There are 3 types of insurance cover. Insurance cover A, B, C. A is all risk covered. B, certain perils have been covered. C, the minimum credits have been covered. So even the C is okay. Even the C is okay, right? They have to agree with the seller for extra insurance arrangements. Should the buyer wish to have more insurance protection, then they have to agree with seller for extra insurance arrangements, right? CIF may not be appropriate for goods in containers, which are typically delivered at a terminal. In such circumstances, CIP rule should be used. CIP ගැන අරක වගේමයි. මේ CIF වගේමයි. හැබැයි delivered at a terminal. Delivered at a terminal. Right? Right. දැන් CIF එක අපි ඉක්මනටම කියලාගෙන යමු. Place in the Incoterm.
Destination.
Nation. Then manufacturing of goods. Manufacturing of goods.
Seller.
Seller. On carriage. Oh, sorry.
Seller.
Sorry. Again, pre-carriage.
Seller.
Seller.
Obtaining export license.
Seller.
Paying import taxes.
Buyer.
Seller.
මම ප්‍රශ්නේ මාරු කළොත් අවු වෙනවාමයි. එහෙම මෝඩ සෙට් එකක්. මම මේ කොහොනකමෙන් ප්‍රශ්නේ මාරු කරනයි. මොකද ඒ අහන්නේ? මම එහාට මට තල්ලු කරලා බලන්න කොහොමද කියලා. කොලිය බලන් කියනවාද කියලා. කොලේ නෑනේ ඒක. මම කෙලින්ම කිව්වා බයයි කියලා. මාව තම්බන්න ටිකක් අමාරුයි. හරි. එතකොට contract for carriage.
Seller.
Loading.
Seller.
Insurance.
Seller. Buyer.
Seller.
Buyer.
Hari. Buyer the seller.
Seller. Buyer.
Seller.
Buyer.
Seller.
What do you mean by CIF?
Insurance
Cost
freight.
insurance and freight.
Cost insurance.
Cost insurance and freight.
What do you mean by CIF?
Cost insurance and
The
freight.
insurance freight.
Cost insurance freight.
Freight.
ඉතින් දෙයියන insurance freight seller නම් මොන කේම බලයිද buyer එන්ට insurance එක ගන්න. හා? පොඩ්ඩක් කල්පනා කරන්න. අටට ආවට කියන්න එපා. මට ආවට කියන්න එපා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ අරින්න ඕන අර සිරුසේ ඔබද ලක්ෂපතියකට. කිව්ව ගමන් කියේ. ලයිට් දෙකක් නැහැ. හරි. පොඩ්ඩක් හිතන්න මම ඊයේ මම ලංකාවේ බත්තකින් කාවා. ඉස්සර කල්පනා කරුවා. උත්තර දෙන්න. මේ වගේ තමයි හැමින් යන්න ඕන. Right. Okay. Unloading.
Buyer.
And on carriage, buyer. Paying import taxes, buyer. Right. Okay. The next one, CPT. I think before that, among කතා කරලා hina කරලා මට අද හැබැයි පන්තිය හොඳයි.
So අපි CPT ගැන කතා කරේ.
ආ?
අපි CPT
නෑ මම කතා කරේ CIF ගැන කතා කළේ. මේ පාඩක මම කොහොමද CPT තමයි කතා කළේ නෑ නෙවෙයි කියන්නේ. මොකද්ද මේ යන්නේ? හා? මේ මම පස්සට ගියේ. මම කොහොමද CPT කතා කරේ? මම දැන් තමයි CPT කතා කරන්න යන්නේ.
Okay sir.
Okay then. Happy. Right. Then shall we take a small break of 10 minutes? Right. The next Incoterm we are going to discuss is CPT, Carriage Paid 2. Carriage Paid 2. Now, obviously, the name place of destination is going to be the place of the Incoterm should be destination.
Destination.
Yeah, because it is not F term now. Then this term could be used for any mode of carriage. Any mode of carriage, right? The exporter fulfill his contractual obligations when he delivers the goods packed in usual manner to the carrier at an agreed place. At an agreed place, right? CPT. In other words, CPT, when you take this chart, you can compare CPT with what is the equivalent one or similar one for only carriage by sea and inland waterway. Right? Then seller must contract for and pay the cost of carriage. Then seller must contract and pay the cost of carriage. Insurance paid by the seller. Insurance paid by the seller. Right? So, CPT insurance cannot be the seller. Insurance has to be by the buyer, CPT. Can you just hold on? But I just want to double check that. Incoterm 2020, okay, just, and this is the Incoterm 2020. Can you see this document? Can you see this document? Hello? Can you see this document? I think I'll have
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is Incoterms 2020, the latest one, and which is published by ICC. It's a small booklet. The cost is 9,000 rupees. So we'll have to buy this book for the benefit of you people, right? Podi potak egulukin salli hoyna mewe. CPT, one moment. Mode of transport. Yes. Even the Incoterm 2020, it says, right? Insurance can, when they talk about the insurance, they are not particular about who is responsible. Who is responsible, whether the seller or the buyer. But it is understood that the buyer, if the proper insurance has not been taken, the buyer will be at a risk. So always the buyer will request the seller, okay, you do the insurance on behalf of us and at our cost. At our cost. So the insurance will be paid by the seller, right? But he will add that amount to the unit price. He will add that amount to the unit price. But the insurance will be arranged by the seller, right? Okay. Then CPT up to the point of loading into the vessel, not the vessel, the carrier, it will be the responsibility of seller. After that, it will be buyer. Then make a mama CPT ke but it is a responsibility of the buyer to take the insurance, but the seller will arrange it on behalf of the buyer. Well, okay, if I ask you this one, the export clearance, who has to do? Export clearance.
Seller.
Seller. Export clearance.
Seller.
Contract for carriage.
Seller.
Seller. Loading.
Seller.
Seller.
Seller. Unloading.
Seller.
Seller. Unloading.
Buyer.
Unloading.
Buyer.
ආගෙන ගිහිල්ලා මම පොඩ්ඩක් ට්‍රක් එකේ පැන්න ගමන් ටක් ගාලා අහු වෙනවා නේ. Then on carriage.
Buyer.
Buyer. Right? Okay. This is very much similar to TFR in carriage by sea and inland waterway. ඒකේ වගේම තමයි මේකේ එන්නේ, but only difference is this will be applicable to any mode of transport. The other one is CIP, carriage and insurance paid to. This is similar to CIF. CIF is only for what do you call this? Sea and inland waterways. CIP is for any mode of transport, right? But the obligations are very much similar. In 2020 Incoterms, there's small difference in there's a new inclusion in the CIP, right? That insurance cover, cargo insurance, has to be provided by Cargo Clause A, Institute Cargo Clause A. That means all risk covered. It's a must. Earlier it was either A, B, or C. Even under CIF, it can be either A, B, or C. Under CIP, it's a must that insurance should be Cargo Clause A. That means the premium is high. Premium is high. That because normally, if it is a aircraft shipment, air cargo, we use CIP, not CIF. CIF cannot be used. Instead of CIF, we have to use CIP, any mode of transport. So air cargo companies, they made it a point that people are not insuring their goods appropriately. That means under insure karla boru karla daano. For the podi me දවසකට නේ මේ transport එක වෙන්නේ, right? From Mumbai to Colombo, 2.5 hours or 3 hours journey. If Mumbai to Colombo by ship, it will take about 3 days or 4 days. Right? So they prefer cargo class C and then bring the goods to Sri Lanka with the shortest time. But the risk is more. That is why the air cargo companies, they insisted this time, no, if you are transporting goods by air cargo, we need cargo class A insurance. Right? We can't take the responsibility. And when there's something happen, there will be so much of claims that claims insurance companies has to bear. Right? Yeah. You want to ask any questions? Right. This is the slide for that. Then DPU. DPU, delivered at place unloaded. This is the only change, only visible change in Incoterm 2020. Earlier we had, under Incoterm 2010, we had DAT, delivered at terminal. That was dropped and this was introduced, delivered at place unloaded. Right? Name place of destination. That means we deliver up to the destination. And unloading. All the other terms, unloading part is whose responsibility? අපි මේ කතා කරපු ඔක්කොගේ මේ unloading part එක කවුද responsibility එක? Buyer. Always buyer. But this one, it is the responsibility of the seller. It is the responsibility of the seller. They have to deliver and unload it also. Right? So DPU, delivery at place, the seller is responsible for moving the goods from origin until their delivery at the disposal place, agreed, unloaded at destination. Unloaded at destination. The seller is responsible for contract of carriage and insurance. Right? The seller is responsible for contract of carriage and insurance. This term can be used for any mode of transportation. DPU. මේ ගොඩාක් කියන්නේ European countries වල වෙන්නේ. Continental transportation, country to country by road. Right? The seller must be confident to arrange the unloading of goods at the named place. Should the parties intend the seller not to bear the risk or cost of unloading, DAP rule should be used instead. If the seller is not prepared to bear the risk or cost of unloading, then we can't use DPU, delivered at place, unloaded. In that case, we have to use, instead of DPU, we have to use DAP, delivered at place. Unloading part එක බයක් එක. Right? Right. Here, the brown color will come up to the unloaded point. Okay? Right. That is at seller's cost. DPU, the kind delivery at place of destination unloaded. We make a truck again, unload කරලම තියෙනවා. DAP, delivered at place. This is also deliveries at any mode or modes of transport, sea, road, rail, air, rail, multimodal, everything. Right? It is necessary to specify place of delivery of destination. May also use where more than one mode of transport is employed. Contract for carriage by seller. Contract for carriage by seller. Unloading when load kala vitarai, unloading part has to be done by the buyer. Right? DAP එකේ I asked you a few questions. What is the place in Nilkotab? Destination or origin? DAP. Destination.
Destination.
Then
Asian.
export clearance. Export clearance.
Seller.
Seller. Then that kind of
Porter.
ground එක දැක්කාම මේ ඔක්කොම දැන් ඒක ඉවර කරලා ඉවරයිනේ. දැන් ට්‍රක් එකේ පටවගෙන යනවා. ගොඩක් මේ ට්‍රක් consignment තමයි. Then contract for carriage. Contract for carriage.
Seller.
Seller. Contract for carriage. Seller. Then loading. Loading.
Seller.
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 Insurance.
Seller.
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 Unloading.
Buyer.
Buyer.
Unloading buyer. Right? Unloading buyer. Right. Okay. Then import clearance.
Buyer.
Import clearance buyer. Very good. දැන් තේරෙනව නේද? right. මේක ගොඩාක් කියන්නේ කන්ටේනර් එකේ shipments වල තමයි මේ transportation තමයි වෙන්නේ. ඒකයි country to country. From Canada to America. ඔක්කොම යන්නේ containers. Container trucks සේරම යන්නේ. ship එකෙන් යන්නේ බොහොම අඩුයි. right? පාරවල් දිගට තියෙනවා. I told you, wherever I go, I used to study those things because I'm learning the practical knowledge is very, very important. What we are going to get, right? About 4 years back, 4 or 5 years back, in 2016, I was in Canada for about 1 month. During that period, I got the opportunity to go in a container truck to USA, Ohio. From Toronto, they were loading and they were taking the goods to Ohio in USA, right? One of my uncles, he owned this truck company, and then he said, if you want, I will arrange you to come with me. Yama drive kala ඊට පස්සේ. So that was a fantastic trip because the truck, they go and they rest in, there are certain places we can wash our clothes, washing machine එකකට දාලා අපි පිළිටිච් එක හොදගෙන එතනින් කාලා ඔක්කොම කරලා ඉවරනකොට ටිකක් හරි. ඒ වගේ about 7-8 days we traveled. Right? That was a DAP one. මම ඔක්කොම බලනවා මේක කොහොමද documentation කරලා තියෙන්නේ. How they go. And they go up to the place and then pay the authentic තිබ්බට පස්සේ import clearance ඔක්කොම company එකේ කරන්නේ. අනිත් බයගේ. ඒ වගේ හරි interesting ඒවා අපි experience කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් අපේ life එකේ. ඒක තමයි මට ඔළුවට වැටලා තියෙන්නේ like stories. The one is DDP. Expert, who has the highest responsibility, or buyer or seller? Buyer. Who has the least responsibility? Seller. Because his responsibility is to manufacture the goods and packed in export quality packing. That's it. DDP is opposite of that. Everything by the seller. Only the unloading has to be done by the buyer or even by the seller. එකත් සෙල්ලම කරලා දානවා. හැම එකම DDP එකේ seller යන්නේ. Right? this term signifies the maximum obligations to the exporter and the minimum obligations by the importer. They load it and they pay export taxes, import taxes, carriage, then insurance, coming and coming to the buyer's warehouse, then unload it, everything done. But do you know the usage of DDP in the world transportation is about 0%. So actually I was thinking this time with the revision that they will scrap this DDP, but they have kept DDP, right? But the maximum obligations to the seller and the minimum obligations to the importer, right? Okay. Now, if I ask you one question, can you answer me that question? We have a what do you call this? Quotation from the seller. A buyer has got a quotation from the seller. It says it's worth US dollars 50,000. X worth US dollars 50,000. Product worth correct. It's worth EXW 50,000. Then they say FOB. They quote FOB price 70,000. Then they say CIF 80,000. Right? Why is the difference of having three types of quotations? Why is the difference? Why there's a difference in these three types of quotation?
At the insurance and other costs.
Yeah. In expert, they have not added anything. Pre-carriage, main carriage, on carriage, insurance, custom clearance, nothing. Right? But FOB, yes. Until you load the goods onto the ship, it's by the seller. So the seller has added that cost to that. Then CIF, everything by the seller. Then obviously the price will go up and the unit price will go up accordingly, and LC is for a higher price. But it is easy for the buyer. Right? That's the main reason. Okay. Can you see these MCQ questions which I have given? Can you see this? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Right? There are is the lower then. Oh, there are 13 questions. There are 13 questions which I want you to try all these 13. Right? I'm not going to discuss it now. This is your homework. Right? Right. You do the questions in terms and then we'll discuss next week. Right? But please do it. If you do it, you can be assured about 24 marks. You can assure 24 marks. Whether questions එකක් හෝ දෙකක් එනවා my multiple choice වල. අද ගන්න 24 marks වලින් marks 15ක් ගත්තොත් That is also something, right? You can score the full amount, right? So don't drop Incoterms. It's easy. That's why I took that effort to explain to you in very simple manner. Now we are going to discuss. I don't know whether we can finish it today, but I'll try to finish as far as possible. Risk associated with international trade and documentary credit. At the beginning, I told you international trade is a very, very risky job. How much you try to cover up the risk, you can end up with some blunder, right? So one thing is very clear. In international trade, you cannot eliminate the risk. You cannot eliminate the risk, but you can mitigate the risk, right? This is a true story which happened to me. I was working for Standard Chartered. One day, one of my good customers, very, very good customers, he came to me and he asked me, Mr. Caldera, I want to get into import-export operations. I said, good, I will help you, whatever I can. The knowledge you need or whatever, I will help you. Then he told me, thank you very much. But Mr. Caldera, I want to know everything and I want to do this business without having any risk. Without having any risk. Can we do that? He asked me. I said yes. Then he told me, පුටි හොඳට හරි ගිහිලා වාඩිලා මට තාම නිකන් ඇවිල්ලා පේනවා. He always wear white shirt, white trouser, very respected person, and he said he's like a school principal. හරි සරයි. අපිත් එක්ක හොඳයි. ළමයින් තේම වෙන ක්ලාස් ලැබ පරාන බයයි. එයා ගහන්නේ. Principal ගෙනවා කියලා තමයි කියන්නේ. Then he said, Mr. Caldera, I have gone to 3-4 banks and they said they can't. But you say, yes. How can I do the international trade without taking any risk? So I told him, sir, if you want to do international trade without taking any risk, my advice to you is don't do international trade. Finish. මෙයා මගේ දිහා කණ්ඩ වගේ බලන් හිටියා. That's the truth. If you are trying to do international trade without taking in a risk to put us into trouble and do all those things, then don't do international trade because you cannot eliminate risk in international trade. But you can, but knowing what are the risks, you can mitigate them. Two different meaning. Eliminate කියන්නේ අයින් කර සමූලයෙන්ම අයින් කරලා දානවා. එහෙම කරන්න බෑ. But you can control. You can mitigate the risk. Now, what we are going to discuss now is the risk associated with international trade and documentary credits and how we can mitigate the risk. This session is very, very interesting. No, not much of theory and all, but going to be very interesting, right? Because it's practical things. As a banker, especially executive in a bank, what you should know when you're dealing with your customers, right? Banks, when I lecture, I do internal training for People's Bank, Public Bank, Carriage Bank, NDB NDB කරනවා commercial bank සම්පත් ඔය කොහොම ඔය කළත් කට්ටිය හරීම කැමති ඉන්නේ මේ පාර්ට් එකට මොකද දේශයෙන් මේක ගන්න පුළුවන් අනික ස්ටෝරීස් වගේ අපිට ඉගෙන ගන්න පුළුවන් කොහින්ද මේවා අපි කස්ටමර් ෂේප් කරගන්න පුළුවන් කියන එක right okay now in international trade operations if you take international trade operations it is I would say four S's. One is international trade operations are short term and self-liquidating. Short term in the sense, when we open the LC, the maximum period we'll say 3 months. And within 3 months, we'll get the goods, we'll settle the bills, finish. Short term. If you take a housing loan, is it a short term or long term?
Long term.
Long term. If you take a PF loan, is it a short term, medium term, or long term?
Long term.
Short, medium, long එක කොයි එකද? PF loan එක.
Long term.
Long term.
Long term. If you take a vehicle loan,
Middle term.
it's a medium term. You have to settle the vehicle loan in 5 years. It's like a medium term. But international trade operations are always short term. There are medium term ones, but rarely long term. Right. Self-liquidating. What do you mean by self-liquidating? Because there's underlying goods in this one. When you receive the goods, you can sell the goods and pay. You can sell the goods and pay, self-liquidating, because there's an underlying goods, right? Secured by the underlying goods, right? Speedily completed. Maximum 3 to 4 weeks, we complete it. So we say international trade operations, we can categorize described under 4S. Then documented credit, if you take the definition of a documented credit, can you remember the Meva Pikalani? What do you mean by documented credit? To pay a certain amount immediately or at a future date, provided that the stipulated documents are presented. Only if the stipulated documents are presented, we will pay, right? An undertaking from the importer's bank to the exporter. Not by the importer. Undertaken by the importer's bank to the exporter. And there's a condition only if the documents are in strict conformity with the DC terms. Right? That's a condition. So under this condition, yes, we do transactions. Right? Under UCP ICC publication UCP 600, Article 4. I asked you to read the articles. I hope you guys have already gone through the articles, right? Article 4 says, credits by their nature are separate transactions from the sales or other contracts. Credits by their nature are separate transactions from sales or other contracts. When we are opening LCs, that's a credit. That letter of credit is a separate transaction from the sales contract. That is why I'm always telling my staff, right? Sometimes the customer will come to the bank and show you the sales agreement, their sales agreement, sales contract, and ask you, sir, this particular condition I can't understand. What do you mean by that? අපි දැන් එක පාට පොර වෙනවා නේද? රයිට්. මෙයාක දන්නේ නැහැ දැන් මගෙන් අහන්නේ මම දැන් කියලා දෙන්න එපා. ඉතින් ඔන්න අපි දැන් එයාට කිව්වල ඉවරලා මිනිහට තේරුම් කරලා දෙනවා. හරි තේරුම් කරලා දුන්නා. අපි දන්නවා කියමුකෝ මගේ ක්ලාස් එකට ආපු ළමයෙක් කියලා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ ටිකක් හරි දැනගෙන ඔයගොල්ලෝ තේරුම් කරලා දුන්නා. Subsequently, we have no guarantee of the transaction. Transaction goes bad. It goes bad. Then මොකද කරන්නේ? දැන් ඔන්න කස්ටමර් එකට කියනවා දැන් අපි කියනවා ඔයා මේක සල්ලි ගෙවන්න ඕන මොකද මේ ඒ ගෙවන්න. නැසෙ මේක වැරදි මෙහෙම වුණා. ඒ ඉතින් එහෙම හරියන්නේ නැහැ නේ. ඔයා ගෙවන්න එපා මේක under LC නේ. දැන් සර් මතකද මම සර්ගෙන් ඇහුවා මෙහෙම කරන්නද කියලා. සර් කිව්වා මෙහෙම කරන්නේ කියලා. දැන් හරි නේද? එතකොට ඉතින් අපිට අහන්න තියෙන පැත්තකින් නම් සනීපද කියලා විතරයි. සනීපද කියලා අහන්න විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. right? කවදාවත් කස්ටමර් කෙනෙක්ගේ sales contract බලන්න එපා. That's a rule number 1. Rule number 1. Even if the customer asks you to go through the sales contract and advise him, don't do that. Don't do that. Right? Because as bankers, we are not supposed to advise the customers about what is there in their sales contract. We have to advise them with all the details of LCs. Sales contract okay, contradict වෙන තැන් තියෙනවා. අපි වැරදි information දුන්නොත් customer might receive money අන්න එතකොට අපිට case එක යනවා. හරි? ඒක කවදාකවත් බලන්න එපා. Article 5 says, in credit operations, all parties concerned deal with documents and not with goods, services or other performance to which the documents may relate. In all credit operations, all parties concerned will deal with the goods, deal with documents, and not with goods. Right? No goods, no services, no other performance, nothing. Only documents. Whether they have done whether we have received the goods or not, if the documents are clean, we have to pay. The documents are clean. If the documents are complied with the terms and conditions of the LC, we'll have to pay. Right? Right. Article 14A. It says, a nominated bank acting on its nomination, a confirming bank, if any, and the issuing bank. All three banks, they have to examine the documents. When they examine the document, the bank must examine the presentation to determine on the basis of the documents alone. We have to do the inspection, we have to do the we have to verify the documents only on the basis of documents alone. The customer ke vena arna deval peravaradi ganna bෑ. Right? Whether or not the documents appear on the face to constitute a compliant presentation. Whether these documents will play a major role about the compliant presentation. That's it. Right? Customer basis එක පිටිපස්සේ background එක ඒව ගන්න බෑ. Okay. Consideration of risk involved in international trade. Consideration of risk involved in international trade. Right? Before deciding whether to enter into a foreign market, either as a buyer or the seller, the business must first consider the risk to which it will be exposing itself. Now, before we decide to enter into the international market, it can be, you can be a buyer or you can be a seller. You are a buyer in Sri Lanka. You are importing certain things from Croatia. Croatia is a European country. in Russian bloc. Now no more, but it's a European country. But Germany definitely common in the right. Now you are not familiar with this guy. This is first time you are going to have interaction with this guy, the seller, right? So you have to see before you open the LC. Straight away they will inform the seller, okay, you send me the pro forma invoice, I will open the LC. Right? Not only that, there are certain things we have to check before exposing ourselves. We have to check the language and the culture. We know English is considered as a standard language in international trade, but its use is not universal. All the countries are not using English. In Spain, do they use English? In Spain, do they use English? As their official language?
No.
No. What's the language there? Spanish. Spanish. The language is Spanish, right? In China?
Mandarin.
Mandarin. The language is different, right? If you are dealing with Saudi Arabia, then their language is Arabic. Their language is Arabic, right? Only in Sri Lanka, even though we are Sri Lankans, English but when you are now, my example was Croatia. Now Croatia, they must be using some other language, right? Not English. But if you are dealing with Croatia, we should know whether my counterparty can handle my conversations, documents, everything in English, because I don't know anything about Croatian language, but I know English. But at least up to a certain extent, yes, these people also have to do it. About 20 years back, China was very backward, but now you should see, right? You should see. But still they have issues. In 2011, I went to Hong Kong to do a training session, right? All the Chinese guys, because now Hong Kong is considered as one of the areas in China, all the Chinese guys from HSBC, different branches, Guangzhou, Beijing, and all those places, Nanking, they came to Hong Kong and participate in the training session. But luckily, those guys were okay, the senior fellows, right? So I conducted the classes in English. But do you know, they were telling me their clerks cannot understand English, some of the clerks. So they have translated UCP 600 and URC 522 into Mandarin. Right? For some people, even in that particular class, some of the difficult things, some people were volunteering to translate into Mandarin. So for the benefit of the majority. Right? අපි හොඳයි අපි ඒකට ගොඩක් හොඳ මම මේ කියන 2011 ලොකු කාලයක් නෙමෙයි 10 years back, right? So that's the situation. So we'll have to say English a topic and otherwise don't start business, you will end up in a disaster. Then cultural differences and sensitivities are equally likely to provide potential traps. Cultural differences, two cultures differences. China, of course, there's nothing much. But if a country like Saudi Arabia, right, certain they are governed by Sharia law. According to the Sharia law, certain things are banned, prohibited, haram, right? ඒවා අපේ කරන්න බෑ. ඒගොල්ලන් කල්චර් එකත් වෙනස් වෙනවා. Then legal issues, different legal systems in countries like ours is different legal system, Saudi is different legal system, right? Uncertainty of legal procedures or changes in legislation, exchange control rules can be different, right? Then buyers and sellers, exchange rate and currency risk. We'll have to check before we enter into a business with the other party. We have to check all these things. Bargaining power. Some people are very strong in bargaining, right? අපි ඔරුව නවාගෙන හිටියොත් අපි පරාදයි, right? Customs and practices. Certain countries, customs can mean how the goods are getting cleared and regular, right? And practices, ඒවා අපි වෙනස් වෙනවා, right? Do you know after Saddam Hussein was killed, that was in 2003 then. Iraq වල Saddam Hussein මැරුවේ 2003 කියලා මට මතක විදිහට, right? Then we were to start business in Iraq, right? I was given the task by HSBC to go to Iraq and start trade finance business on behalf of HSBC, to open a branch and then when a bank එකක් අපි ගත්ත සල්ලි වලට DS bank එකලා දරුස්ලාම් bank ඒකෙට මේ business එක පටන් ගන්න කියලා මම කිව්වා මම නම් යන්නේ නැහැ ඒකට මට කීයක් මට මගේ පඩිය ට්‍රිපල් කළා මම කිව්වා ඒත් බෑ කියලා මොකද පඩිය ට්‍රිපල් කරාට මට පෙට්ටියෙන් එන්න වෙන්නේ ෂුවර් එකට මම පෙට්ටිත් නැහැ ගන්න මේ බොඩි බෑග් එකේ එන්න ඕනේ ඉන්න රටට දුබායි වලට ගියාම තමයි බොඩි බෑග් එකේ පෙට්ටිය හදන්නෙත් නැහනේ ඒතර බොඩි බෑග් එකේ තමයි මට එන්න වෙන්නේ ඒකෙන්ද අපි බෑග් එක නමුත් එතෙන්දී මම දැනගත්තා in Iraq they were telling me, the staff was telling me, if you give $20 or $10 or $20, you can take anything through the customs. That is their practice. So when we are dealing with countries like that nature, we should know about those things. Without knowing that, you should not get involved in this business. Financial risk. Buyer or seller concern on deferred or advance payment. That we discussed this. Buyer always try to have the business under deferred payment. He wants to defer the payment. But seller always, they want advance payment. Again, an open account is good for buyers. Advance payment is good for sellers, right? So financial risk is also there. Then credit risk under different payment types. right? Role of bank guarantees to mitigate bias against this risk. So we can mitigate those different types of method by taking bank guarantees or standby letter of credit. We discuss the open account transactions, the risk we can mitigate by taking bank guarantees or standby letter of credit, which is similar to bank guarantees. Then the transport risk, the length of time the goods need to travel to get to their final destination. Whether it's coming from America to New York to Colombo, long distance, about 20 days. But if it is coming from Cochin to Colombo, 1.5 days or maximum 1 day. Right? So it is, those are the risks. Risk of goods being damaged or being tampered with while in transit can happen. Appropriate insurance to mitigate the risk. We have to take appropriate insurance to mitigate the risk. Right? How we are going to mitigate? To take appropriate insurance. Once again, another way we are putting, just to put everything on your head, right? The common risk in trade operations. One is sovereign or and regulatory risk. Sovereign or regulatory risk. We call it country risk. Right? The sudden impose of foreign payment restrictions. For example, restrictive government policies, exchange controls, tariff and quota restrictions. These things happen. Then Lanka Metika Tino. You are bankers now. Tell me. Do we have sudden impose of foreign payment restrictions?
Yes.
Yes. Very much. Very much. Right? Even under LCs, we are not in a position to pay because of the government policies. Exchange control has stopped. They are not allowing even advance payment. Okay, forget about that. Right? You can't forget about it. $50,000 can put it on in a minute. Right? Even if I want to send some money from my NRFC account, can you do it now? When we open an NRFC account, all the banks told us that is your money. If you have an NRFC account, you can remit the money as you wish. But can we do it now? No, they will not allow to debit to transfer money, outer remittances, debiting my NRFC account. They are not allowing, right? Even for education purpose. Those days we used to have, we used to give the approval under certain categories for education, right? Now they give, this is what I heard last week from my branch manager, right? He told me now the government is allowing only the tuition fees, not the accommodation and the boarding fees. So that part we have to send it from us. How? How can we do it? Right? Apay account again yamanda convert kind. So those are things. Then tariff and quota restrictions. Tariff and quota restrictions. And tariff very winner. Adu karna. 2-3 days back, mukaduni. Gas road. Gas very kala. Eka tamana eka winner. Kiripiti bolta mukadukale. Kiripiti kan mukadukale. Milk powder. 1 week back. What about the tariff?
Reduce the import tax.
Yeah, they took out the import tax. They took out the import tax. Import tariff, they have taken it out. Right? So because of that, prices have come down. බලන්න මේ ඔක්කොම හැසිම කියන්නේ ඔයගන්ට ඒකයි ට්‍රේඩ් ෆයිනෑන්ස් ඉගෙන ගන්න ජොලියෙන් ඉගෙන ගන්න. උඩට ගන්න එපා. මේවා පත්තරේ බලලා ටීවී එක බලලා ඒ බල නිවුස් එක අදාළ කරගන්න ඕගලන්ගේ පාඩමට. බලන නිවුස් එක අදාළ කරගන්න පාඩමට. එච්චරයි. මොකද බලන නිවුස් එක අදාළ කරගන්න. එතකොට මේක පුළුවන් ඔළුවේ තියාගන්න පාඩම් කරන්න ඕනේ. ලියන්න පුළුවන් ලස්සනට. ලියන්න පුළුවන් ලස්සනට. Right? Okay. Import export prohibitions. Export import licensing. That's one of the things. There are certain items, licensed items. අපේ import prohibitions තියෙනවද මේ ළඟදී දාපුවා? Post COVID. Do we have import prohibitions? It's a damn shame as bankers.
To import,
Yes.
you have to get a license.
Not only license. There are certain items you have to go to get the license from import controller. That's a different thing. Import licensing, and complete prohibitions. Yes.
Palm oil.
Palm oil.
Turmeric.
Huh?
Turmeric powder.
Turmeric powder. Sorry.
Fertilizer.
Luxury items.
Luxury items. Vehicles. Vehicles ඔක්කොම නැත්නම් නේද? අපේ වාහන නිකම් මේකින්ද ඩබල් වෙලා. චීන වාහන. Those are risk in a country. We are doing international trade, right? So if any person is sending goods to Sri Lanka now, that person in Croatia should know about our import-export procedures, licensing issues, embargoes. Right? This is what I am trying to tell you. Otherwise, you will end up in a disaster. If you know these things, yes, then you can mitigate the risk. You can check with the customer and all those things. Anti-dumping legislation. ලංකාවේ එකත් නෑ මේකත් මේ ඔක්කොම යන්නේ ලංකාවෙන් examples ලංකාවේ මතකනේ අර ලන්ඩන් වල ඉඳන් කෙලින් මෙව්වා අර hospital waste few months back container load of the 1 or 2 containers loads of hospital waste from London hospital එක අයින් කරන waste එක මෙහාට ගෙවුවා dumping අපි මොනවා කරන්නද why if certain countries they consent, they have anti-dumping legislations, right? Inadequate foreign exchange reserves, Sri Lanka at the moment, right? Scarcity of convertible currency, right? Fluctuation or volatility of foreign exchange exposure, everything, right? So try to understand these things with examples from our own country, right? Then you don't have to study by heart. Legal risk of foreign laws and courts, dispute settlement, legal policies, injunction order against payment. Do you know a few years back, about 20 years back, this is one of the good things which was restricted under President Chandrika Kumarthanga. Right? Those days, when the buyer doesn't want to do the payment, he will take an injunction order against payment. They will bring an injunction order to the bank. Bank order again payment take කරන්න එපා කියලා. right? සමහර වෙලාවට මේ බැංක් එකේ මැනේජර්ස් ළම කියනවා මේ කස්ටමර්ට කියනවා කස්ටමර් යාළුවෙක්ට මචං ගිහිල්ලා ඉන්ජන්ක්ෂන් ඕඩර් එකක් ගෙනින් මම මේක අල්ලගෙන ඉන්නම් දවසක් පේමන්ට් එකේ. අරෙන් දාන ඉන්ජන්ක්ෂන් ඕඩර් අරන් යන අතර පේමන්ට් එකේ අපි හෝල්ඩ් කරනවා. දැන් එහෙම බෑ. right? ඒ වගේ countries එක nobody wants to do business. These things you have to check. It is not easy to do international trade operations. We have to check all these things, right? Injunction orders. Then the bad thing that you have to prove before we get the injunction order. Many acts that are perfectly legal in one country can be illegal in another country, right? So we have to be aware of the regulations. The same is true for the laws of contracts, employment, competition, and other business laws, right? Foreign exchange risk. Trade is always at the mercy of exchange rate fluctuations due to various political, economic, and even purely speculative reasons, right? When we open the LC, it is 196 rupees per dollar. By the time we receive the money after 3 months, the dollar has gone up to 225. So what about the profit margin of the buyer? Because they were calculating everything at 196. So by the time they receive the goods and the documents, they have to settle the bills. When they come to settle the bills, the rate has gone up to 225. Entire profit has gone, right? Local currency can wipe out the entire profit. Also, interest rate risk due to floating rate loans, right? Cargo risk. Transit disasters are an ever-present hazard for those engaging in international trade, right? Hazards such as storm, theft, pollution, leakage, explosions, fire, like an express pearl, the classic example. As most goods are transported by marine transport, and every exporter should have an elementary knowledge of marine insurance to get the protection at the minimum risk, right? Commercial risk. Lack of knowledge, inability to adapt to environment, different kinds of situations to be dealt with, greater transport time involved, right? Those are commercial risks. Another one is bank risk. All this time we were talking about the country risk relevant to country. Now the bank, not only the country, even you are dealing with a bad bank, that's a bad bank risk also, right? Financial instability or poor creditworthiness of the bank, right? Then poor checking standard and having a habit of rejecting the documents, quoting various discrepancies. There are certain banks, they always give unwanted discrepancies and they were trying to reject the documents. Right? Delay in making payments to correspondence, adherence to ICC rules, right? Some people, they purposely delay the payment. But as per ICC rules, we have to do the payment immediately. හැබැයි දැන් ලංකාවේ දැන් වෙනව නේද? වෙනවද? Payments immediately යනවද? international payments?
No.
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 You have to be in the queue. You have to be in the queue. The payments are getting delayed. Maybe sometimes a week. Right? So don't ask me what is going to happen to our country. The people will think of our country. Right? ඒක පුතේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ නේ මාව කෝඩ් ගන්න බෑ මේව කරලා අන්තිමේදී ලංකාවේ නිවුස් කාර්යය වගේ මාව තුස්සන් ඇයිද දන්නේ නැහැ මේවා කියනවා කියලා හැබැයි ඉතින් ඇත්ත කතා නොකර බෑ ඉතින් ඕගලන්ට මේක කරගන්න right අපි මොනවද කියන්නේ අර අනිත් පාටියකට the customers are ready to give the money but we can't send the we can't remit the money out because of the scarcity of foreign currency. Right? The delay now it has become an inherent thing. Right? Being domiciled in a country notorious for forex restrictions and classified as high risk. Right? මේ වෙනකොට අපි රටවල high risk category එකට වැටෙනවා. They say we are notorious for forex restrictions. Very difficult to translate. Right? Fraud risk. Fraud risk is another interesting area. Fraud can happen. Arvatic okkom harita tibba country risk, bank risk, but fraud risk can happen. I'll tell you a nice story about bank risk. This has happened a few years back. I think that time I was a manager, of course, Standard Chartered, and we had a bank called BCCI, Bank of Credit and Commerce International. Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. It was a Pakistani bank. Their office was at Fort Logla, වැඩ කරන කට්ටිය නේද Fort වල Fort area එකේ වැඩ කරන කට්ටිය නේද ළමයි එක පුතෙක් හිටියා නේද කොමර්ෂල් බැංක් කොහෙද
Mount Rainier.
ඈ
Mount Rainier branch.
Mount Rainier Fort වල ඉන්න කට්ටිය ඉන්නවද කවුරුද මම ප්ලේස් එක කියන්නේ බැංක් එකේ තිබුණ තැන ඒතර ඔයගන්ට ඔලුවට වැටෙනවා මේ ෆෝට් වල තියෙන බේලි ස්ට්‍රීට් කියලා හන්දියේ මේ ෆෝට් වල කාගේජ් එකයි මිලර්ස් එකයි මැද තියෙනවා පරණ කාගේජ් මිලර්ස් බිල්ඩින් දෙක මැදට තියෙනවා බේලි ස්ට්‍රීට් කියලා ඒ බේලි ස්ට්‍රීට් එක තමයි ඔක තිබුණේ ඒ බේලි ස්ට්‍රීට් එකේ කෙරෝල්ට මහව තමයි ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් චාර්ටර්ඩ් එක තියෙන්නේ ලොකු බිල්ඩින් එක පරණ විදියට අලි වගේක් තියෙනවා ඒක තමයි කාගේජ් බැංක් when this bank started international trade, some of our guys, not only international trade, when the bank started business here, few of our guys from Standard Chartered joined BCCI for a higher salary. Right? And whenever we come in the morning, I used to park my vehicle near the Cargill building, car park again. Our colleagues, former colleagues, they were some guys are just sitting outside and having a cigarette before the work starts. එහෙම habit එකක් තියෙනවා ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඇති නේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ යාළුවෝ. අන්තිම ධම්ම එකත් ඇදලා තමයි අතුලට යන්නේ හරියට මට අමාට. right? ඒක they have been used to that. දැන් අපි එනකොට අපි දැම්ම හැමදාම දැන් good morning කියලාගෙන එනවා how are you මචං කියන්නේ. One day when I was coming to the bank to Standard Chartered, I saw one or two guys, our guys, were just having a cigarette outside. So just say hello and pet talk at that. I went to office. Evening, when we were going back, nobody was there. Bank was closed. To see that bank was bankrupt, finished. අපේ කට්ටියගේ ජොබ් උත් නැහැ. The bank was bankrupt. බංකොලොත් කළා. During the day, it has closed. Most of it was an international bank, having branches in many countries. Overnight, busted. And most of the customers got affected. But luckily in Sri Lanka, if I'm correct, I think it was Ceylon Bank, they came forward. I think Ceylon Bank came forward and they took the business and the customers of BCCI. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඩීල් එකක් දාලා ඒගොල්ලෝ අරගත්තා. අරගත්තින්ද අපේ ගොඩක් කට්ටියගේ බිස්නස් බේරුණා. අපේ කට්ටියගේ ජොබ්ස් බේරුණා. අපේ අනිත් රටවල ගොඩක් ඒවා නැති වෙලා ගියා. Right? So that risk is very, very important when we talk about the bank risk. When you are dealing with another party, you have to see who is their bankers. So always try to deal with a good bank, right? And otherwise the frauds can happen. Now if you come back to the frauds, right? Dealing with sellers, dealing with a seller who is not known, right? Know who can be even more important than know how. This is a golden rule, right? Know who can be even more important than know how. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? මට ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්න විදිහට තේරෙන විදිහට මට කියන්න බෑනේ. මොකද්ද මේකෙන් තේරුම් ගන්නේ?
කවුද හරි නෙමෙයි මොකද්ද හරි.
නෑ. කවුද හරි කියන එක නෙමෙයි. Know who can be even more important than know how. When we are doing international trade, you have to have the know-how. Know-how කියන්නේ කොහොමද මේක කරන්න කියන දැනුම නැත්තම් අමාරුයි. දැන් අපි උදාහරණයක් ගත්තොත් එම අපි සිංහලෙන් මේක ලේසි තේරුම් ගන්න. අපි කියනවානේ දැන ගියොත් කතරගම නොදැන ගියොත් අතරමඟ කියලා කියනවානේ. අපේ සිංහල යෙදුමක් තියෙනවානේ. දැන ගියොත් කතරගම නොදැන ගියොත් අතරමඟ. ඒ වගේ තමයි. අපි දැනගෙන තමයි බිස්නස් කරන්න ඕනේ. Otherwise, you will get landed for unnecessary issues. But what I'm trying to tell you is, when you are doing international trade, know-how is very important. But know-who can be even more important than know-how. ඔයා කොච්චර බිස්නස් කරන්න දැනගත්තත් වැඩක් නැහැ. ඔයා හොරෙක් එක්ක නම් කරන්නේ. මගඩිකාරයෙක් එක්ක නම්. Know who can be even more important. Right? It's very, very important. Huh? Right. Payment for non-existent or worthless goods against presentation of falsified documents by the beneficiary. Sometimes the beneficiaries will submit forged documents for non-existent goods or worthless goods, right? That's also a fraud. Forged document credit. Even the documentary rate can be a forge, right? Insurance fraud. It can be, they can over-insure. The value of the, exact value of the goods are $10,000. But you have insured the goods for over-insuring. You have insured the goods for $50,000. Right? Then they deliberately damage the goods and claim for insurance money, 50,000. But the actual cost is how much? Actual value, 10,000. So that is also a fraud. We call it insurance fraud, over insurance, right? Charter party frauds. What do you mean by charter party frauds? What is charter party vessel? It's a very common fraud. In certain what do you call this, transactions, when you are doing the shipments, we'll have to hire a ship. We'll have to hire a ship. අපිට bulk ship එකක් ගන්න වෙනවා කෙලින්ම. Especially for goods like cement, oil, crude oil. Then cement, crude oil, another bulk ගන්නේ මේ fertilizer. ඒ වගේ දේවල් අපි ගන්නේ ship එකම ගන්නවා. Sugar, and the other thing is sugar. Sugar යන්නේම charter party. Sugar containers එන්නේ. Containers තමයි එන්නේ. ඒ sugar ship එක කියන්නේ මුළු ship එකම sugar to one person. Right? එතකොට cement, clinker හැම ඔක්කොම එන්නේ charter party. We hire a ship. And there can be a lot of frauds, right? A charter party, I'll tell you the risk. Normally, a liner vessel, when we issue the BL liner vessel, there is a agreed path of the transportation. Now, for example, from London to Colombo, they will touch Dubai port. Then they will touch port in Pakistan, then Mumbai port, and then Colombo port. Paratino, exact route, right? They will not deviate from the track. Now it's like this. If you want to go to Kataragama by bus, you get into the bus from the central bus stand, right? Then that bus will go either then the highway, then තියෙනවා. That bus will go along Galle Road, Panupura, Alutara, then Ambalangwada, Galle, Matara, Beliata, Hambantara, Kataragam. පාරක් තියෙනවනේ. ඒ පාර තමයි ඒක යන්නේ. දැන් ඕනනම් Kilimmawa, get into the highway from Kottawa, then Mattala, then Kataragam. මේක මගදී එහාට මෙහාට deviate වෙන්නේ නැහනේ. That's a standard agreed route, right? Any liner vessel is like that. Charter party vessel, when you load it to charter party vessel, the charterer, the master, he will go to Kataragama. But how he goes to Kataragama is a different thing. Right? අපි දැන් Kataragama bus එක යනවා නම් එහෙමයි. Then your family wants to go to Katragama, you want to make it a trip also, right? Then you hire a van. You hire a van. There are vans where you can hire self-driven. One of your guys will drive the vehicle. ඔගොල්ලෝ එහෙම තියෙනව නේද? එතකොට ඔන්න දැන් අරගෙන යනවා. යනකොට කට්ටිය ළඟන අයියෝ we don't want to go in the highway. Useless. There's nothing to see. We'll go. දැන් උදේ තමයි ඩිසයිඩ් කරන්නේ. තාම ඩිසයිඩ් කරලා නැහැ කොහොමද යන්නේ කියලා. දැන් වාහනේ නැගගට පස්සේ කට්ටියක් කියනවා අපිට highway එක ගන්නවා. අපි නෑ නෑ අපි මේ තවපෙද කතර වෙන පාරක් යන බණ්ඩ මේ උඩවලවේ උඩවලවේ එහෙන් යන් තනමලවිල ගිහිල්ලා එහෙම යන්න. දැන් ඔන්න ඔයගොල්ලෝ මේ ගිහිල්ලා තියෙන routes. ඒ පාර වැඩි majority එක මොකද majority එක උඩවලවේ. අපි අලිත් බලාගෙන අලින්ට කණ්ඩ දීගෙන යන්න. හරි. දැන් යනවා. තනමලවිල කිට්ටුවට එනකොට උඩවලවේ බලාගෙන යනකොට ඉන්න අපේ young crowd එකේ නම් කියනවා අයියෝ හැමදාමත් කතරගම වෙනවා දැන් ඔය ගිල දැන් ඇති වෙලා තියෙන්නේ අපි යන්කෝ මේ කතරගම යන්නේ නැතුව එහෙම බණ්ඩාරවල බදුළු බණ්ඩාරවල ට්‍රිප් එකක් ගහමුකෝ මේ හැමදාම යන කතරගමනේ. එතකොට දැන් ඔන්න අපි හරවනවා තනමල් වලින් දකුණට හැරෙවුවොත් කතරගම වමට හැරෙවුවොත් වෙල්ලවයි පාරේ බණ්ඩාරවල. අතෙන්ට ආව ඩිසයිඩ් කළා my car my petrol දාගත්ත වමට හැරෙවුවා ගියා. Is it the standard route we are going to Katragama? No. That now we have decided. We have changed our mind. Alright? ඊට පස්සේ ඔන්න කතරගම යනවා. එතකොට මෙල්ලමයි කිට්ටුවේදී ඔය දිගටම ඔයගොල්ලෝ දකින්න vehicle එකක් පිටිපස්සෙන් උලංග follow කරනවා. මෙල්ලමයි පාඩු හරියකදී හරස් කරලා නවත්තනවා. මෙලින් නම් මොකද්ද? කවුද හරස් කරලා නවත්තන්නේ? ෆිනන්ස් කම්පැනි එකේ. රයිට්? මේක තමයි චාටර් පාර්ටි එකේදී වෙන්නේ. ෆිනන්ස් කම්පැනි එකෙන් නවත්තනවා. ෆිනන්ස් කම්පැනි එකෙන් නවත්තලා they will show the warrant and everything. Okay, මේ ෆිනන්ස් කියලා නේ. අපි දන්නේ නැහැ නේ. අපි මේ හය කරන් යන වාහනයක් නේ. අපේ වාහනේ අපි දන්නවා. මගේ කාර් එක මම දන්නවා. මේ ෆිනන්ස් නෑ. perfect. insurance, license, insurance ඔක්කොම තියෙනවා. මේකේ finance outstanding කියලා. The seizers have seized the vehicle. They will put all our goods on the road and take the vehicle and go. Ladies ලත් එක්ක අපි ෆයිට් කරන්නද ගහගන්නද? බලන් ඉන්න. දැන් ඉතින් අපි කතරගම ගියා. දැන් මගදී ඩිසයිඩ් කළා බණ්ඩාරවල යන්න. දැන් අපි පාරයිනේ බඩු ටිකක් තියන් බඩු ටික ඔක්කොම බාලා පාරයිනේ බලන් ඉන්නවා. Now you can understand what is a charter parking, right? This has happened to me, to a lot of my customers. I have experience of handling these things, especially the sugar shipments, cement shipments, oil shipments. These are happening, especially fertilizer, right? When we hire the ship, do you believe while on transit, the vessel is Panama flag, so coming from Brazil with a shipment of sugar to Colombo, right? While during the voyage, right, the owner has sold the ship. They have sold the ship. The new owner comes and obstruct the ship, show the ownership documents to the master. Api nane ege egene master inni. Me ship ege master, ship master the documents pinwa. They'll take the control of the ship. They take the control of the ship, and then they go to the closest port, maybe a very remote area like Somalia or Madagascar, remote port, right? අපේ ශිප්පයක් යන්තම් කිට්ටුවට යන්න පුළුවන් රිමෝට් පෝට් එකකට ගිහිල්ලා they will unload the goods. They don't want the goods. What they want is a ship. They will unload the goods and take the ship and go. දැන් අපේ goods ටික in a lying in a in a country, unknown country, without any cover or insurance or good name, right? They were like neither. Nika, they don't. I had another incident. Mid-sea, the new owner has taken the ship, taken over the ship, and they have painted the ship also. කම්බදාලා එල්ලලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඒ ෆිල්ම්ස් වලත් ඔය දකින්න පුළුවන් අපි දැක්කම ඉගෙන ගන්නවා කොහොමද ඔය වෙන්නේ කියන එක. Mid sea white color ship එක ඔන්න blue color වෙනවා. Blue color paint කරලා නමක් මාරු කරලා වෙන country එකේ flag එකක් ගහලා ship එක යනවා. Right? So charter party shipments are always very vulnerable for frauds. You have to be very careful. Then cargo theft. Cargo theft. Some ports are very famous for this. බඩු බෑවද බඩු ඉස්සුව. ලංකාවේ ඉච්චරම නැහැ. මේ ලංකාවෙත් මිනිස්සු කරනවානේ. පෝට් එකේ මිනිස්සු කරනවා. Cargo theft වෙනවා. Piracy. Somalian pirates, they will. The golden rule is, if the deal looks too good to be true, it probably can be a fraud. Right? It's a very important rule. We see fraud prevention, analysis, how we can prevent the frauds, right? Check the integrity or financial standing of the exporter or the middleman. I'm talking about from the point of view of importer. The importer has to check the integrity or the financial standing of the exporter, middleman or agent always before you enter into transactions. Right? Now, these are the things you have to discuss with some customers. When they come to if they ask you, sir, my business පටන් ගන්න යන්නේ import කරන්න මොනවද sir බලන්න ඕනේ කියලා කිව්වම වෙන පොඩ්ඩක් මේවා කියන්න ඕන. ඔයා check කරන්න හැමතිස්සෙම අර party එක කවුද කියලා. ඒක හරි important. Know who is more important than know how we are going to do it. Right? You have to check the financial standing of the exporter. Then the customer will ask you, sir, how can I do it? Yes, we can help you. Right? The bank can, through your credit department, trade admin department, you can check for, bank reports from the seller's bank or another bank in seller's country, your correspondent bank in seller's country, right? You can charge them also. Good business to you also, but you are helping them, right? Remember, in DC operations, all parties deal in documents and not in goods, right? The goods should be readily saleable. ඒකත් බලන්න ඕන. හදිස්සියක් වුණොත් මේ goods ටික විකුණ ගන්න පුළුවන්ද? විකුණ ගන්න බැරි garbage ටිකක් ගැන දාගත්තොත් අපි අමාරුයි. Check market prices. Never be too greedy. Check market prices. Never be too greedy. It's very important. Another story I can tell you. When I was this also happened at Standard Chartered. One day, one of my good customers, very good customers, they came to me. මහරි ආදරේ අංකල් කෙනෙක් වගේ එච්චරම හොඳයි. A Muslim guy. That was his second generation doing business with Standard Chartered. Very reliable, right? Fairly old customer. He came and he gave us a LC to be open to bring down what do you call this electrical items from fluorescent lights in a tube light and a chalk cake and a chalks. This has happened about more than 25 years back. amount was, that time it was a big amount. $20,000 can a big amount. Then I think $20,000. Right? The price was very cheap. Well below the market price. 50 cents dollar the weather. එක යුනිට් එකක් වුණේ. ඊපස්සේ මම ඇහුවා නම කියවෙන්න ගියා. හොඳ නැහැ. Mr. So and so. This price is not the market price. We can always check the market prices from the internet, right? And this is why we call real managers. This is not the market price. Why? No, sir, I got a very good deal. This is well below the market price. If I once I bring this one, I can what I use I can control the bazaar. ඒගොල්ලෝ බਜ਼ਾර්නේ කියන්නේ මාකට් එකට කියන බਜ਼ਾර්නේ පිටකොටේ කට්ටිය කියන්නේ I can control the bazaar. ඒ අඩුම ගානකට ඒගොල්ලෝ මේක කරනවා. හරිද? ඒකට අනිත් මිනිස්සුන්ට business නැහැ. So he was very greedy on that. So I said, do you know this customer? Have you done any business with him earlier? No. But then I said, why don't you go for, shall I ask from Standard Chartered Hong Kong bank a credit report on this customer? Then he asked me, I said, about $500 you have to pay, but why should I pay $500? Right, unnecessarily? Then my profit margin will come down. It's all right. I can trust this guy. He got down the goods, and banks are not dealing with goods. And we got the documents. We checked the documents. Documents are clean. All documents were confirmed or compatible with the terms and conditions of the LC. So he said, can you give me a import loan for this? I said, okay, we debit the import loan and we release the document to him. The following day, evening, he came to me running and crying. He's crying again as take a kandulu. Hey, Mukaduni. Said, not a single electrical item. உங்களுக்கு கண்டெய்னர் එක මතියන්නේ පරණ සරප්පුයි කැඩිච්ච සපත්තුයි කැඩිච්ච සරප්පුයි කාඩ්බෝඩුයි පිදුරුයි ඔය ටික දාලා තියෙන්නේ පුරවලා තියෙන්නේ. Just imagine, right? You have to be never be too greedy. What happened to his greediness? He lost everything, right? As a bank, can we help him? No. He has to settle this import loan. As per the UCP 600, we are dealing only with documents, not with goods, right? So you see the situation. Now ensure that the exporter uses reliable shipping lines, conference line, regular lines, not charter party. Always risky. Ask for inspection certificates from independent parties as specified in UCP. Ask for inspection certificate. Inspection companies like SGS and all, they will charge you an amount. I have seen some people have asking inspection certificate from the beneficiary. The beneficiary horana inspection certificate එක යාමන දෙනවා නම් හරි නේද? ඒක අපේ සිංහලෙන් කියන්නේ හොරාගේ අම්මගෙන් පේන අහනවයි කියලා. ඒ වගේ වැඩක් නේ. ඉතින් මොකද්ද මේ inspection certificate එක beneficiary එකෙන් අරගෙන තියෙන ප්‍රයෝජනේ? Those are mistakes the customers are doing. Avoid shipping guarantees. Shipping guarantees also very, very difficult, right? Full of when we are covering shipping guarantees, I will cover that part, right? Then we talk about the importer's point of view. about the exporter's point of view, same thing. Then he has to check the integrity of the importer. The bank should carefully scrutinize whether the DC is workable. When they receive the LC, they have to check whether it's workable, right? Whether there's any clauses where the exporter cannot fulfill, then he won't get the money. The exporter will be able to comply with the terms and conditions of the LC. Ensure that no ambiguous terms, conditions. Use reliable forwarding agents. Very important. Better forwarding agents like now. Right? Are you guys watching the are you guys watching the teledrama of Devanirama? Mannam balanu. Ogulu balanu.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Today, මෙන්න මේකට උත්තරේ මම කියුවේ හැමදේම බලන්න ඕන බලනකොට ඒකෙන් ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕන කොහොමද ට්‍රේඩ් ෆයිනෑන්ස් වලට මේක මැච් වෙන්නේ කියලා. These days in that අනුහස්ලගේ අක්ෂලගේ කම්පැනි එකේ මේක තියෙනවනේ මම මේ කියන්නේ දැන් ටෙලිග්‍රෑම් එකෙන් යන්නේ that another guy is trying to obstruct the company. අර කවුද එකෙක් ඉන්නවනේ. හරි. They have introduced a new freight forwarder. නේද? මට මතක නේද? අලුත් freight forwarder කෙනෙක් introduce කරනවා. Now these guys are trying to screw the company. Right? ඒක තමයි අපි කියන්නේ we have to use the reliable forwarding agents. Otherwise you will end up with a disaster. දැන් අරගොල්ලෝ ආක්ෂල අනුහස්ලාගේ වෙන scene හින්දා they are not checking these things properly. You see, මං කියන්නේ එක බලන්න එපා කියලා නෙමෙයි බලන එකනොත් තමයි මේක අපිට පාඩමට ඉගෙන ගන්න කොහොමද වෙන්නේ කියන එක. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලන්ට දැන් තේරෙනවානේ. Avoid granting excessive credit period or limit to the buyer. You should not do that. You will never get the money. Ensure sufficient insurance cover against transit risk. Right? Better to have an agent in buyer's country. Right? Next to the issuing bank, insolvency of the applicant. If the applicant go bankrupt, then it will be an issue to the issuing bank. That is why we have to get the security, sufficient security, right? Fraud, sovereign and regulatory risk. We have to check. Goods may be damaged or lost in transit. So always it has to be insured. They are properly insured. Next to the applicant or the importer, non-delivery of goods, fraud risk, short shipment of inferior goods, and shipping guarantees. Shipping guarantees, under shipping guarantees, I will explain to you, right? Very, very risky. And foreign exchange risk, like what our country is facing now. Failure of the issuing bank, like BCCI bank. BCCI bank එක LCR පුමිසුන මොකද උනේ? bank එක මේ bankrupt වුණාම they were nowhere, right? Risk mitigation of importer, deal with sellers with sound reputation and track record. Request for performance guarantee to avoid non-performance. Agree on more secured payment methods, DC and open account. Right? Buy and sell in the same currency to minimize forex risk. Euro වෙන්නේ එකනේ එක country to country, but all are using same currency. So there's no exchange risk. ලංකාවේ LC ගන්නකොට එක rate එකක් pay කරනකොට තව rate එකක්. Forward contracts cover kind of long, that also now we have stopped because of the volatility of the currency. Ensure sufficient insurance cover against transit risk. Right? Next to the exporter, failure to comply with the credit conditions. You have to read the LC before you decide whether you are going to act or not. Failure or delays in payment from the issuing bank or the bank and counter risk, right? Legal risk. Risk to the advising bank, nominated bank, man kata karන්නේ. මෙන්න මේක පොඩ්ඩක්. If there are managers, assistant managers, credit officers, RMs in this group, are there any managers, branch managers in this group or in other? Gentlemen, assistant managers. Don't tell me no, because if you want, if I want, I can check. I don't want to do it, right? Calling application. Any credit managers, credit officers?
RDB, Credit Chief Manager.
Yeah. Then other commercial banks, anyone who is dealing with credit facilities or none. All right. So it is very important that RMs or relationship managers of credit, they have to be aware of this double financing or accommodation financing, right? That is why we always tell the relationship managers to work along with the hand in hand with the trade services managers, because relationship managers are the people who give the facility, but trade managers are the people who knows about the nitty-gritty things of these operations, right? Trade finance period should always match with the trade cycle of the customer, right? We have to carefully monitor the request for drastic increases within a short period of time. Customer පටගාල ඉන්ක්‍රීස් එක කරනවා සර් වැඩේ හොඳට යනවා දැන් මගේ ෆැසිලිටි එක තව 10 මිලියන් වලින් වැඩි කරන්නකෝ තව 50 මිලියන් වලින් වැඩි කරන්නකෝ මම දෙන්නම්ක බිස්නස් අපි වැඩි කරනවා right and accept transport documents issued by known parties දැන් customer ගේ party තමයි transport document එක එන්නේ ඒකත් fraud එකකට එනවා right හොඳම දේ තමයි adopt common sense approach. මම හැමතිස්සම ළමයින්ට කියන එක තමයි common sense. Don't think much. You use your common sense. And the other thing, when you're dealing with customers, there's a thing called gut feeling. Don't discount your gut feeling. Gut feeling කියන්නේ එකපාරට උගන්ට හිතනවා මේක fraud එකක්ද. ඒක something fishy somewhere. You have that feeling. Then, if you have that feeling, but you are not sure about things, and තව යාළුවෙක්ට කතා කරලා කියනවා මේක මට නිකන් හරි නෑ මේ කස්ටමර්ගේ සීන් එක. ඒතර එයා ඉඳන් කියනවා නෑ ඔක මිනිහා හොඳයි නෑ ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන එකක් නෑ. ඒත් ඔයාට ඉස්ලාම ආවනම් gut feeling එකක්. අර gut feeling එක කියන්නේ අපි සිංහලෙන් කියනවා බොක්කෙන් වෙන එකක්. ඒක ෆිලින් එක ආවනම් මට නිකන් සැකයි කියලා ඒ සැකේ පස්සේ ඉන්න. ඒක ඩිස්කවුන්ට් කරන්න යන්න එපා වෙන කෙනෙක්ගේ කීමක් උඩ. right කවදා හරි ඔයා හරි. හරි. And the other thing, accommodation finance is a lot of frauds can happen under accommodation finance. මේක වෙන්නේ existing cargoes of non-existent cargoes of sugar, oil, fertilizer. ඔය තුනේම document තියෙනවා cargo නැහැ. cargo පටවල නැහැ for a forged documents ඉන්නේ. We call it accommodation finance fraud. Warning signals of accommodation finance is customers la or fictitious transport documents ඒවට තමයි එන්නේ ඔක්කොම forged documents, right? And especially when you are dealing with lesser developed countries, you have to be careful, right? And another thing is the price of goods not in line with the market price. මේ ඔක්කොම අපිට check කරලා බලන්න පුළුවන්. ඉන්ටර්නෙට් එක බලන්න පුළුවන් ඒවා. හරිද? අපි තුම ෆ්‍රේට් ෆෝවර්ඩින් කම්පැනි එක උනත් අපිට ගහලා බලන්න පුළුවන් එහෙම එකෙක් ඉන්නවද කියලා. මට වෙලා තියෙනවා. When I was working in HSBC, Dubai මට උනේ නෑ. මට නෙමෙයි උනේ. වෙන කෙනෙක්ට වෙලා ඒ කේස් එක, since I was a regional head, they referred it to me. By that time, we have incurred the loss. We have incurred the loss. Not a small amount. About $3 million US. $3 million US. Right? What has happened was, we opened the LC. LC was opened by a Nigerian bank. High risk, number one culprits, Nigerian bank. That LC was received by us, but LC was confirmed by HSBC, Johannesburg, South Africa. Right? එතකොට නයිජීරියා තියෙන සවුත් ඇෆ්‍රිකාවලනේ. මේ ඇෆ්‍රිකන් කන්ට්‍රි ගන්න, සවුත් ඇෆ්‍රිකා නෙමෙයි ඇෆ්‍රිකන් කන්ට්‍රි ගන්න. ඒතර ඇෆ්‍රිකන් කන්ට්‍රි එකේ අරගොල්ලෝ එක්ස්පර්ට්ස්ලා මේකේ බැංක් රිස්ක් එක ඔක්කොම චෙක් කරලා ඒගොල්ලෝ කන්ෆර්ම් කළා. කන්ෆර්ම් කරපු හින්දා HSBC Dubai has accepted the LC. The shipment was bitumen. What is bitumen? Bitumen is ඔය දැකලා තියෙනවද පාරේ තාර වගේ දාන්නේ කළු පාට මේවා ඒ තාර bitumen shipment එක from Iran to Iran port was Bandar Abbas port to Lagos, Nigeria වලට යන්නේ. Perfect documentation, right? And it was complied with the terms and conditions of the LC, and the customer was pressurizing for to negotiate the documents. So our idiots, they have given the value to the customer. But one guy, a Sri Lankan guy, he was suspicious of the transaction, and he gave me the copy of the BL. So I have my dealings with the IMB, International Maritime Bureau in London. So I send it for verification of the BL. Then they inform me it's a forged BL. By that time, money has gone. Right? Only 1,000 out of $3 million, only $1,300 were remaining. Within one day, they have transferred to another bank, and then they have taken the money out. $3 million, right? So these things happen. So you have to be very, very careful. Then double financing is on the same transaction. You can read this same transaction. They can have an example theory. Right? එකම transaction එක banks දෙකකින් මේගොල්ලෝ finance කරනවා. That also we have to be very careful. Right? So the most important thing is when you are doing transactions, the KYC and KYCC of your customer. KYC is know your customer, and KYCC is know your customer's customer. That's the other party. That also you have to check. As a prudent banker, you have to do it. Then only you can mitigate the risk. Now you will tell me where the time we have voucher check කරන්න කොහොමද? It is up to you. As a lecturer, I can tell you what to do and what not to do. How we are going to practice is yours. Right? Okay. Any questions? Okay. I think if you don't have any questions, now I'll have to stop it. Anyway, well, 1 o'clock, I'll have to start the other lecture. Okay. Now, for your homework, I have given you one of the what do you call this?
Simon.
Incoterms specials ටික කරගෙන එන්න, then we'll discuss as the first thing next week, right? අපි spend කරනවා about 20 minutes විතරගේ ඒකට ඉවර කරලා මේ ගන්න මොකද ඔයගන්ට ඒක important. Okay, I hope this area was very interesting to you. නේද? ගොඩක් කල්පනා කරලා ඉගෙන ගන්න දේවල් තියෙනවා. පාඩම් කරන්න නෙමෙයි, use your common sense. As a banker, always use your common sense. Do not discount your gut feeling. එච්චරයි මං කියන්නේ. As a banker, current account එකක් කළත්, savings වල handle කළත්, මොන department එකේ හිටියත්, don't discount your gut feeling. එක එකා ගේනවා ආන්න එපා. ඕගොල්ලන්ට මට හිතනවා නම් මේක I'm not sure කියලා මට හිතනවා something fishy කියලා හිතනවා නම් කවදා හරි ඒක හරියයි. ඒක හිතෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක බොහොම කලාතුරකින් ඉන්නේ. ඒ තත්ත්වයට හිතාගන්න තමුන් හදා ගන්න ඕන. තමුන්ගේ දැනුම මනස හදාගෙන යන්න. Okay. Thank you very much.